considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, for 4 years, the Immigration Subcommittee has sounded the alarm about the cost of the Democrats' open border policies on our schools, our hospitals, homeless shelters, food banks, law enforcement, drug and human trafficking, and the effect on suppressing American wages. But what we're now discovering is that many within these populations immediately set out to rob our country of literally billions of dollars paid by American taxpayers to help needy Americans. Worse still, evidence is now emerging from whistleblowers that this was done while Democratic officials in sanctuary jurisdictions deliberately turned a blind eye to this industrial-scale larceny in exchange for political support. We've already heard from TSA agents who watched helplessly as Somali immigrants brazenly shipped millions of dollars out of this country in their carry-on luggage, while alarms to the Biden administration were simply ignored. We've heard audio recordings of these criminals discussing with Minnesota's Democratic Attorney General how they had each other's backs. We've heard whistleblowers tell us of their warnings to Minnesota's governor resulting in retaliation against them. Reports that terrorist groups like al-Shabaab in Somalia received a cut of these funds are particularly disturbing. One estimate is that the Minnesota scandal accounts for some $9 billion of stolen funds, and as investigators begin turning over rocks in other Democratic sanctuary jurisdictions like California and New York, this may prove just the tip of an iceberg of corruption. But there's more. Although this fraud may well end up implicating thousands of illegal aliens allowed into our country and then protected from prosecution by the Democrats, Social Security fraud implicates literally millions, and I'll address this issue in the ANS that I'll present shortly. Yet our ability to remove such fraudsters is hamstrung by the court, sometimes for decades. In one case from 2017, the Board of Immigration Appeals held that an alien was not removable from the United States for having committed an aggravated felony, despite the alien's fraud conviction for a $169,000 food stamp scheme. In another case, an alien was placed in removal proceedings in 2005, where he remained until at least 2013, when his case finally made its way to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit to determine whether his conviction for conspiracy to traffic in identification documents made him removable from the United States. Another fraudster spent 2 years challenging his removal proceedings, even though he admitted that he had received up to $3.5 million through food stamp fraud. Other cases with aliens convicted of wire fraud and food stamp fraud languished for 1.5 years and 4 years, respectively, before a federal court finally upheld their removal orders. In many other cases, aliens remain eligible to stay in the U.S. indefinitely despite their fraud convictions. This bill by our colleague Dave Taylor streamlines this removal process. The bill is simple. If you admit to or are convicted of fraudulently receiving public benefits, you are out of here on the next plane and can never return. I think the vast majority of Americans would ask, especially after all we've learned, who could possibly oppose such a sensible bill? Well, I'll yield back so that we can find out.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Raskin, for an opening statement.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's another week and another markup of an immigration bill that takes an already deportable crime out of the headlines and then makes it a deportable crime again, but this time without requiring any conviction. So the bill is characteristic of what's going on. It makes the commission of a variety of fraud offenses a deportable offense without requiring an actual conviction of fraud. But conviction of a fraud offense is already a deportable offense. It's considered a crime involving moral turpitude and a specifically enumerated aggravated felony, the conviction of either of which subjects an immigrant to deportation. In the past, we've heard our colleagues claim these bills are necessary to resolve ambiguity, but where's the ambiguity? Section 101843 of the INA lists fraud as an aggravated felony and therefore a deportable offense. Even more starkly, we've got longstanding Supreme Court precedent from over 70 years that makes it clear that fraud is a crime involving moral turpitude and therefore a deportable offense. In Jordan versus DeGeorge, a Supreme Court case decided in 1951, the court held that the phrase crime involving moral turpitude is without exception been construed to embrace fraudulent conduct. The opinion stated that in every deportation case where fraud has been proved, courts have held that the crime in issue involves moral turpitude. The court even addressed the idea of statutory ambiguity, declaring Congress sufficiently forewarned respondent that the statutory consequence of twice conspiring to defraud the U.S. is going to be deportation. So the law is settled and it's clear. The initial version of this bill, in fact, even required a conviction. It's the amendment in the nature of a substitute that the majority will offer, which strips that requirement away. And probably this is simply to create some novelty in the legislation to justify it. Otherwise, it's completely unnecessary. It's redundant. What's wrong with the state of the current law? It's not impossible to convict people of fraud. People are convicted of fraud all of the time. Even President Trump was convicted of fraud by a jury of his peers of 34 counts of falsifying business records with the intent to defraud. And even with trial, due process, the presumption of innocence, and jury conviction, Trump does not think it was fair. How can it be fair to dispense with the requirement of due process in a trial, presumption of innocence, and a jury verdict entirely? One might say the rejection of the conviction requirement reflects the administration's determination to focus on fighting fraud today. In fact, due to the Trump administration's single-minded focus on immigration, the FBI directed its agents to deprioritize white-collar crime and to devote their time to immigration instead. As a result, the prosecution of white-collar crimes, which includes a whole variety of fraud offenses, of course, was down more than 10% last year compared to white-collar prosecutions in the last year of the Biden administration. The bill also makes offenses related to theft or bribery and programs receiving federal funds a deportable offense. Again, this is something that was already covered. Our committee has been ignoring its oversight duties in the face of open fraud and corruption taking place in this administration, and it chooses to flex its authority, again, over powerless people in the immigration community rather than over the places where real crime is taking place within the government. This bill is simply another effort to follow the narrative pushed by the administration, a fake focus on fraud that ignores the pervasive fraud taking place before us right away. The bill is unnecessary, it is redundant, and it does nothing at all to combat the actual fraud that we're suffering from in the country. I urge members to oppose the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a
Without
substitute.
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purpose of the amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment delineates specific federal crimes that make an alien inadmissible to or removable from the United States. This amendment also incorporates my Consequences for Social Security Fraud Act, which the House passed on a bipartisan basis 2 years ago. That bill simply says that if you're an alien who admits to or is convicted of Social Security fraud or identification document fraud, you cannot enter the country, and if you're already here, you should be deported. That's just common sense. Even the New York Times recently reported that, quote, as many as 1 million illegal aliens are using fraudulent or stolen Social Security numbers. According to another report, in 2017 alone, there were 1.2 million cases in which illegal aliens used Social Security numbers that belonged to somebody else or were fabricated. That number surely has skyrocketed following 4 years of the Biden-Harris open borders. A 2022 investigative report found that because of this fraud, victims, quote, may face tax bills for income they didn't earn or depleted benefits and may suffer from poor credit histories or even criminal histories. And that's exactly what happened to Daniel Clover, a Minnesota man whose identity was stolen by a Guatemalan illegal alien with a criminal history and multiple deportations. Because of the identity theft, Clover lost thousands of dollars through garnished wages and increased taxes and spent years unsuccessfully trying to untangle the mystery of his stolen identity. Now imagine that the victim is you, and the perpetrator is an illegal alien who's allowed to stay in the United States indefinitely as the case inches through endless litigation specifically intended to exhaust the system. By specifically listing federal crimes that make an alien inadmissible to and removable from the United States, this amendment closes loopholes, removes the years-long litigation that so often bogs down the removal process, and strengthens the immigration system. This amendment also ensures that criminal aliens can be held accountable for defrauding the American people if they admit to doing so. Finally, the amendment guarantees that the fraudsters described in this bill cannot exploit Americans' generosity ever again by receiving any immigration relief in this country. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in
Without
the
objection, the
nature.
amendment will be considered as read, and the gentlelady from Washington is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is straight out of the Republican playbook. Find a crime in the news, make that crime a deportable offense without requiring a conviction, and then disregard the fact that the people subject to deportation already upon their conviction of the crime. The bill is inspired by the allegations of fraud in Minnesota that a conservative YouTuber claims to have discovered 4 years after the Department of Justice under President Biden began investigating these crimes back in 2022. Fraud-related crimes are already crimes involving moral turpitude, meaning that legal immigrants, including green card holders, convicted of these crimes are already deportable. There really is no need for this bill. If we're going to talk about Minnesota, let's talk about how Republicans have deployed an estimated 3,000 Department of Homeland Security agents to Minnesota. Already, immigration agents have arrested or harassed too many Minnesotans, including a 20-year-old U.S. citizen who was detained for hours and then left to walk home in the snow. Horrifically, this surge of federal agents also led to the tragic and preventable shooting of Renee Nicole Good last week. As such, I am introducing a straightforward amendment after what my colleague said last week about wanting to have a fair, independent investigation into Renee Good's death. I would hope that they would support my amendment, which will do just that. The amendment would delay the effective date of this legislation until the Hennepin County Attorney, the Minnesota Attorney General, and DHS certify that Immigration and Customs Enforcement have fully cooperated with the Minnesota state and county-led investigation into the death of Renee Nicole Good.
What do you think?
And just in case anybody has not been watching TV across the country, didn't follow what happened last week, Renee Nicole Good, a mother of 3, including a 6-year-old child, had just dropped off her small child at school and stopped to support her neighbors when she was shot 3 times at point-blank range and killed by an ICE agent who appears to have called her a, quote, effing bitch seconds after killing her. Initially, the Trump administration signaled that it would work jointly with local Minnesota law enforcement on an investigation, as is customary in these cases. However, the very next day, the administration rescinded that cooperation agreement. And now the Trump administration is actively refusing to share information, video, or even work with the Hennepin County Attorney and Minnesota Attorney General, leading them to launch their own separate investigation. If the Trump administration is so confident in the propaganda that they put forward about last week, they should welcome a joint investigation. They should want to work with local officials in Minnesota. But instead, the opposite is happening. The Trump administration appears to be afraid of what an independent, transparent investigation will bring to light about what actually happened to Renee Nicole Good last week. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, President Trump has not backed away from his statements, claiming falsely that the officer was recovering from his injuries in the hospital, despite video evidence that clearly shows him walking away from the shooting apparently uninjured. Secretary Noem has outrageously claimed, without any evidence whatsoever, that it was an act of domestic terror, her words. The vice president has falsely and outrageously stated that ICE agents have, quote, absolute immunity. Not true. Given all these lies, there is no world in which we can trust the Trump administration to conduct a fair, transparent, and unbiased investigation into the death of Renee Nicole Good. Not only do they not want to investigate the officer and hold him accountable if that's what is necessary in this case, they want to conduct a character assassination of Renee Nicole Good. Mr. Chairman, we need an independent investigation into what happened in Minneapolis. This is not the first time it's happened. In only the last 4 months, immigration agents have fired on at least 9 people with lots of lies and lots of evidence that debunks their narrative. Ms. Good lived by a conviction, as her wife said, that, quote, every person, regardless of where you come from or what you look like, deserves compassion and kindness. I hope my colleagues will support this amendment for an independent investigation into Renee Nicole Good's killing. I yield back. Oh, and I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that an Axios article titled "Feds Bashed for Shocking Lockdown of Minneapolis ICE Shooting Probe" be entered into the record.
Without objection, gentlelady yields back. Does the gentleman from California insist on his point of order?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized.
As much as I would love to debate the gentlelady on this point, her amendment would introduce material beyond the scope and purpose of the bill before us. It therefore violates House Rule 16, Clause 7. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does the gentlelady, the sponsor of the amendment,
Yes.
wish to be heard on the point?
Yes, I do.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment is clearly germane to the underlying legislation. This legislation under consideration empowers the Department of Homeland Security to remove individuals accused of committing fraud. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the enforcement arm of DHS, has been surged to Minneapolis to investigate fraud. A DHS spokesperson said, quote, Minnesota is ground zero for the war on fraud. This operation in Minnesota demonstrates that the Trump administration will not stand idly by as the U.S. immigration system is weaponized by those seeking to defraud the American people. That was a DHS spokesperson. Renee Nicole Good was killed by an ICE agent as a direct result of that operation. So if we're going to give DHS additional authority to deport more people for fraud without the due process requiring a conviction, then we should at least ensure that we are cooperating with local law enforcement in the investigation of a death of a U.S. citizen and mother of 3 stemming from their current fraud-related mission. So this amendment does that. It is directly connected to the underlying legislation, and I'm not sure what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are afraid of. If they want to vote against the amendment, then certainly go ahead and do that. That's your right. I would hope that that's not the case, but that certainly is your right. But to dismiss it as non-germane simply because they don't want to ensure accountability for Renee Nicole Good's death is simply wrong. So many of my colleagues on the other side last week when we were talking about this whole situation called for an independent investigation into the shooting. Well, here's your chance. Here's your chance to ensure that that happens, directly related to the underlying legislation. I ask that we have a vote on this amendment.
The gentlelady yields back. I have no problem voting against the amendment. This was close. We're just trying to follow the rules. And so the gentlewoman's amendment does not satisfy the subject matter and fundamental purposes test. House Rule 16, Clause 7, therefore is not germane and is out of order. Who seeks recognition?
I've asked for a recorded, go ahead.
We'd like to appeal the ruling of the chair, if we might, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The ruling of the chair has been asked for. The gentleman from Wisconsin, or excuse me, gentleman from California moves to table. The clerk will call the roll. The question is on the motion to table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Roll call vote, Mr.
Roll
Chairman.
call being requested. The clerk will call the roll on the tabling motion offered by the gentleman from California.
Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa. Mr. Biggs. Mr. McClintock. Mr. McClintock votes aye. Mr. Tiffany. Mr. Massey. Mr. Roy. Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald votes aye. Mr. Klein. Mr. Gooden. Mr. Van Drew. Mr. Nels. Mr. Nels votes yes. Mr. Moore. Mr. Kiley. Ms. Hageman. Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee votes aye. Mr. Hunt. Mr. Fry. Mr. Grothman. Mr. Grothman votes aye. Mr. Knott. Mr. Knott votes aye. Mr. Harris. Mr. Onder. Mr. Onder votes aye. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt votes aye. Mr. Gill. Mr. Baumgartner. Mr. Raskin.
Nope.
Mr. Raskin votes no. Mr. Nadler. No. Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen votes. Mr. Cohen votes no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Swalwell. Mr. Liu. Ms. Jayapal. Ms. Jayapal votes no. Mr. Correa. Mr. Correa votes no. Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Scanlon votes no. Mr. Neguse. Ms. McBath. Ms. Ross. Ms. Ballant. Mr. Garcia. Ms. Kamlager-Dove. Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes no. Mr. Moskowitz. Mr. Goldman. Ms. Crockett. Mr. Biggs, you're not recorded. Mr. Biggs votes yes. Mr. Massey, you are not recorded. Yes. Mr. Massey votes yes. Ms. Ross, you're not recorded. Ms. Ross votes no.
Clerk will report. Oh,
Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein votes no.
we'd rather, Mr. Klein, we'd rather have a yes if we can.
Mr. Klein votes aye. Ms. Ballant, you're not recorded. Ms. Ballant votes no.
Oh, okay, the clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 12 ayes and 9 noes.
The motion to table is adopted. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize that these bills are important bills to have, and fraud is something that shouldn't be committed, especially by, if there's people are guests in our country, but they should be convictions. And this is a way to just put people out of the country and change the voting rolls in the future. That's what a lot of this is about. But what happened in Minneapolis, and I'm pleased that Mr. Jayapal brought it up, is something this committee needs to concentrate on. This was an unbelievably, clearly unjustified homicide that the administration immediately jumped on to defend the officer, but just not only defending the officer, but blaspheming the lady, Miss Good, whose name was appropriately chosen. She was a good lady. She did nothing wrong. And it's my understanding from reading the laws and being briefed on by some, that the ICE agents have authority only when they have a warrant for somebody's arrest or a reasonable cause, probable cause that somebody is in the country and illegally in the country because of immigration problems, but they have no law enforcement authority whatsoever unless they've been deputized by the governor, and they had no right to try to control traffic, because this did not involve an ICE operation that was being deterred in any way. When that officer came up to the car and reached in and grabbed inside and said, "Open up your car door, get out of your car," he had no right to do it. And people who are clothed in the appearance of law enforcement, intimidate people when they have no right to do it. That was a violation of the law, and she had every right not to do it. And when she drove off, the man in front of her, who shouldn't have been there, that was insane, he was responding to her wife, who had said, dude, why don't you go get lunch? He didn't like that, so he decided to shoot. He had his gun out almost before she started to drive forward, and it was clear she was turning to the right. This was an unjustified homicide in our country that we've all seen. And the administration jumps in and says, we're going to attack this woman and call her a domestic terrorist. She's a victim who is not with us anymore. She's dead because an officer of the United States of America killed her, and it's been on video, and we've all seen it, and we've seen our president, our vice president, and Cruella Gnome go after her as if she was some type of domestic terrorist. They've attacked her before her body's in the ground. This is cruel. It's the wrong picture of our government and not the way our government should be. It should, any law enforcement community that I know of, certainly the Memphis Police Department, if an officer does a shooting, even if it's pretty clear that it's self-defense, they are relieved of duty pending an investigation. This man has not been relieved of anything. He was sent to the hospital by the defense counsels that they have their attorney saying, cover your CYA. And he went there to CYA. When he was walking away from the scene and going, call 911, he was walking like he was in the Olympics. He had no problem walking. And I'm telling you, for somebody who has problems walking, he was walking straight path, strong path. He was a very virile man. He had no problem walking. He didn't need to go. And then they all jumped in their car and drove away and left the crime scene. On the front end, they're directing traffic, telling her to get out of the car. He's telling her what to do and get out of the car and whatever they were yelling. And then after she's shot and they see her bleeding there, they drive off. Law enforcement doesn't drive off when somebody has been shot and is possibly dying. They try to render aid. They split. That's not America. And we need to investigate it, and we need to see what's going on, and there's no reason why Keith Ellison and the Minnesota Attorney General's office shouldn't be given all of the data that they have to see that his investigation is the best possible. And there's no question in my mind, they will not do an investigation that is fair and independent. They're trying to defend their people. This is not ICE versus the people of the United States, and that's the way they're looking at it. The administration looks at ICE as our guys, and anybody they shoot is the enemy. The American public is not the enemy. They are not the enemy. And sending more ICE agents into Minneapolis now is the equivalent of what they did when the man from Afghanistan, who was here legally for many, many years, shot and killed the lady from Oklahoma, who was with the National Guard, and killed her here in Washington, D.C. And Trump had to admit, he said, there's been no killing, no murders, no murders in D.C. since we've been here. He said, there was that one killing. Well, it was one killing. Because the lady was there because Donald Trump brought her to D.C. And she was killed by Afghanistan. And then nobody from Afghanistan can come in the country anymore. Because one person does something wrong, it's not a reason to penalize every person like that. And that's where they're coming from. This is a war against America and against due process and against justice. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady, we'll go to Mr. Nadler, and I think the gentlelady from California was wanting recognition too.
Thank you,
Mr. Nadler, and then we'll come to California.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make two separate points. First, this is a series of one in a series of bills that do something that should never be done. It says that anyone who has committed a fraud offense, and a fraud offense is already considered a crime involving moral turpitude, and an alien who commits a crime involving moral turpitude is deportable under current law. So what does this bill do? It says he doesn't have to be convicted in order to be deported. That is a fundamental disregard for American standards of justice. You shouldn't be penalized without a conviction. You shouldn't be deported for a crime of which you haven't been convicted. That's number one. Number two, let's talk about fraud. Let's look at our president. Republicans can hardly pretend to be the champions of fighting fraud when they're led by the undisputed world champion of perpetrating fraud, Donald Trump. Let's count his frauds. He's a convicted felon. He was convicted by a jury of his peers of 34 counts of fraud offenses in 2024, last year, 2 years ago. In 2024, a New York judge found Trump liable in a civil fraud case for conspiring to manipulate his net worth. In 2022, a jury found the Trump Organization liable for 17 counts of criminal tax fraud and falsifying business records, and the organization was fined the maximum penalty of $1.6 million. In 2018, Trump had to shut down his charity after the New York Attorney General brought a lawsuit accusing it of operating, quote, a shocking pattern of illegality. And a year later, he was required to pay $2 million to 8 charities because of his misuse of his charity. In 2016, he paid $25 million to settle multiple lawsuits alleging fraud by his now defunct Trump University. Mr. Chairman, Donald Trump is lucky he was born in this country, or he would have been deported many times for multiple frauds involving moral turpitude. Again, this bill is a series of bills. We all agree that people who are convicted of crimes involving moral turpitude ought to be deportable. But this is one of a series of bills that says you just have to be accused under certain circumstances. You don't have to be convicted. That is fundamentally un-American. And now let me make my second point. We're doing this while ignoring the major issue before the country right now. ICE is behaving like an occupying army. Like an occupying army. They burst into houses without a judicial warrant. They have a warrant signed by ICE, but that's not good. When the owner of the house says, show me a warrant, so we don't need one. They rappel down in a helicopter to an apartment building and take everyone out of the building. How do they know that that everyone in the building is an undocumented alien? They arrest American citizens. And people are afraid to go around in Minneapolis and in other places if they can't prove citizenship. How many people carry their passports with them? If I were stopped and were asked to prove my citizenship, well, I have a card that says I'm a member of Congress, that would do. But if I weren't a member of Congress, I would have no proof of citizenship. A driver's license isn't such proof. And look at the case of Renee Good. The officer shot her unjustifiably. One shot from the front, and you see the video, 2 shots from the side, and you see the car being turned away from the officer so as not to endanger. Mr. Cohen made the points. I'm not going to repeat them, except to add one other point. Besides the fact that the officer walked away and didn't offer aid, a citizen came up and said, I'm a doctor, let me go see her. And they refused to let the doctor go see her. Did you ever see a police force in this country of any kind say, you can't render medical aid to someone who's been shot? That's why the local authorities ought to have all the evidence to investigate the crime. That's why you can't trust the federal government, because Kristi Noem and J.D. Vance, without any evidence, before they had time to have evidence, pronounced her a terrorist. We still haven't seen any evidence of that. So they reached the conclusion before they had the evidence, and now they won't let the local authorities have access to the evidence to investigate it because they have a predetermined outcome. Mr. Chairman, this is an un-American attack on not only all the people of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but on all of us and everyone who values our own rights as citizens. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to oppose this bill. It's, like we have been saying, the current law already allows people to be deported for fraud if they are not here legally and creating crimes. But the fact that this would not require a conviction means that you all are suggesting that due process is immaterial. And I thought that due process was a fundamental right, under the Constitution. I find, once again, this is a way for this body to pivot and talk about something else other than what is going on. And if we're going to talk about fraud, then let's talk about it. I mean, we have an administration that's, probably rendering the biggest fraud when it comes to economic policy and civil liberties that this country has ever seen. We are talking about defrauding the American people with people who are stealing money. Well, it's hard to go after folks who are stealing money when you are not actually funding the agencies and the departments and the staff people working in those departments to go after folks. You know, it's hard to go after IRS fraudsters, for example, when you've deformed the agencies so much because you don't want the rich to have to pay their taxes. So if we're going to talk about fraud, let's talk about, you know, the fact that this president ran on a platform of making America affordable again. He said costs are going down, record highs in the stock market. But when I'm at the grocery store talking to folks, what I'm hearing is that this administration has reduced your minimum wage so that you can't earn as much, that he's cut wages for farm workers, in addition to pillaging agricultural communities so that folks are even too afraid to work to pick the fruits and vegetables that we all want to purchase and eat at our tables, making costs go up. He's denied 2 million in-home health care workers minimum wage and overtime pay. He tried to shut down Job Corps, young people trying to get some training so that they can get a job. And then let's not talk about these trade policies and these tariffs that have made costs go up because the tariffs and the taxes are being exacted onto us. Let's not talk about the close to $1 trillion cuts to your health care, your Medicare and your Medicaid to pay for the permanent tax cuts for the super rich. I mean, that's fraud. We haven't conducted any kind of discussions or oversight about that. I mean, you want to talk about fraud? How much are the taxpayers paying for us to invade Venezuela and then steal their oil and then have all these discussions about selling the oil and who's going to get the money? And people are saying, who's going to get the money? Then you hear in the news that, I don't know, the president's going to put together some offshore account. We don't even know. But we won't ever know if Republicans don't hold hearings actually talking about the fraud that the American people see every day on their television. This ballroom. I mean, can we get a little transparency on that kind of fraud? People want to know, how much money are you taking from me and what are you doing with that money? Because as we talked about last week, what happened in Minnesota is serious. You want to talk about fraud? Why is the FBI not cooperating with local law enforcement in Minneapolis? I mean, what is the FBI doing? Where is the DOJ on this? You want to talk about fraud? It's fraudulent to say some crazy talking point, if you don't comply, you will die. I was like scouring the police cars in all of the cities that I've lived in. I've never seen that motto on the side of a police car. Mine says protect and serve, keeping the community safe. Not if you don't comply, you will die. So if we want to talk about fraud, please let's talk about it. Because people, the American people have tons of questions about how their civil liberties are being defrauded and how their economic rights are being defrauded at the hands of this administration without any oversight coming out of any of these committees. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on some of the concerns that my colleagues have been expressing concerning the independence and the thoroughness of any investigation into what happened in Minneapolis. I mean, we've already seen these concerns, and my colleague had an amendment about why it is so important that we have state and local authorities participating in the investigation, both for their on-the-ground expertise and to provide some legitimacy to the investigation that the FBI is undertaking when the Department of Justice and when the White House so quickly jumped in without any investigation and tried to characterize what happened, a characterization, that this was some kind of violent incident by Ms. Good, which was very quickly rebutted by every video, by bystander testimony. It just doesn't hold up. So it is really important that any investigation is legitimate and is perceived to be so. So I would have wholeheartedly supported the amendment to include the local law enforcement authorities, but I think we also need to make sure that we're not overlooking the fact that an agency that historically investigates officer-involved shootings when there's a federal officer involved is the Office of Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Justice. And that office has been sidelined here. They've always been involved in these. They have longstanding expertise. We are learning that several attorneys from that office volunteered to undertake that investigation, knowing that it was going to be a hot-button investigation, and they were told to stand down. I mean, this smacks so much of a cover-up and certainly further undermines any kind of trust in the process being led by the FBI. I mean, this is an agency that has gone into similar situations and issued unpopular opinions at times because they followed the facts. They didn't rush to judgment. They didn't try to whitewash either an officer who had engaged in excessive use of force or someone who had maybe ended up in a situation where they were killed or injured when there was justification for the officers. So I'm really, really concerned about the fact that the Office of Civil Rights, the people who protect all of our civil rights, who would protect and vindicate Renee Good's civil rights and those of other peaceful protesters, people who are standing up for essential American values, that they have been pushed out of this. And we've got reporting now that those attorneys, that more attorneys are resigning from the Department of Justice because they believe that they're being sidelined, that the Department of Justice is completely sidestepping what it's supposed to do. It's not meeting its duty in this very important moment. And I think it's the job of this committee to step up and to conduct those kind of investigations, and that's what we should be doing. So I would ask unanimous consent to introduce an article from The Guardian dated this morning at 9:48 entitled "DOJ Attorneys Resign Over Decision Not to Investigate Agent in Minneapolis ICE Shooting."
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
General yields back. I don't know who was first here, but we'll go with the ladies first, and we'll go with Mr. Johnson. Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to associate myself with the remarks of my colleague from Pennsylvania. I'm very concerned about the extent to which the Office of Civil Rights at the DOJ has been sidelined and underfunded. And Americans do not like what they are seeing on their TV screens. They do not like it. YouGov poll that came out in the last 48 hours showing a majority of Americans disapprove of the way that ICE is conducting itself, and they do not want this to continue. They feel like it is an attack on their civil rights, and rightly so. I also want to talk about the fact that it's very difficult to sit here and take seriously any efforts regarding going after fraud from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle when one of the first things that President Trump did when he was sworn in is he went after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an agency that is independent, and its goal is to protect U.S. consumers. That's literally its mission. And at the beginning of his second term, Trump appointed an acting director who directed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to stop any regulatory activity and moved to fire 90% of the agency's staff. The staff that was literally standing up for Americans who had been victims of fraud and had returned $21 billion back to consumers who had been ripped off. And so we have an independent agency that was doing the work of protecting Americans from fraud, and this president decided to go after pretty much the one agency that was going to bat for all of us, preventing people from ripping us off from credit card companies, ripping us off from financial institutions and banks. So I don't know.
Will the gentlelady yield?
I certainly will. I yield to the ranking member.
It's such an excellent point you're making that they targeted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was all about combating fraud against American consumers. But you could add to that that they sacked 17 inspector generals in all of the federal agencies whose precise job it is to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse.
I'm so glad, Mr. Ranking Member, that you brought that up. That's exactly right. When you sideline the people, the inspectors general, whose job it is to do oversight, to ferret out fraud, and you prevent them from doing their jobs, how can we sit here and say that we're actually doing something to fight fraud? It makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't pass the straight face test. And it's difficult for us, day in and day out. I feel like we come in here and we have to exist in some kind of upside down land. And people want us to forget the stuff that happened just a year ago from this administration, who came in gangbusters, preventing us from doing the things to protect our constituents from fraud. And then we sit here and we are asked to forget all of that. And I want to just be on the record today that what happened to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was a travesty. It was an agency that was sticking up for all of us, and it has now been hollowed out. And I don't know how you can sit here and say that you're fighting fraud when that is what has happened. Mr. Ranking Member, do you need more time?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, what we've seen from the beginning of the administration, a dismantling of the infrastructure that is designed to combat foreign corruption, fraud. They took down the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and said that they wouldn't enforce that any further. There's been a dismantling of the governmental infrastructure against fraud and corruption. So now, essentially, they want to take all of these crimes whose prosecution and whose investigation they've neutered in the government, and then suddenly revive attention to it simply through the immigrants and the immigration system. And I think it's a pathetic way for them to proceed, and I appreciate your yielding to me.
And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized. And the gentleman.
I'm actually stunned that anyone would use the CFPB as the paragon of virtue. The CFPB is one of the most corrupt federal agencies ever created in the history of the United States. Violates the Constitution and how it was framed. It was intentionally created so that there was no congressional oversight. It was created in such a way that Congress did not have the power of the purse over the CFPB. The Supreme Court has found both of those two aspects of the CFPB to be unconstitutional, in the sense that it was not Congress that provided the funding for CFPB, but actually they basically identified their own budget, receiving money from the Federal Reserve, making it impossible for the president to remove the head of the CFPB in violation of the Constitution and Article 2 of the United States Constitution. I've never seen an agency that worked harder to violate the due process rights of those businesses and entities that were the disfavored entities related to the CFPB. I watched as individuals were forced to disclose attorney-client privilege in violation of the law. I watched as they targeted, again, disfavored industries simply because they didn't like them, yet never were able to prove any kind of criminal conduct for those entities. The CFPB CFPB is exactly contrary to our very form and structure of government. I cannot imagine that anyone would hold it up as protecting us from fraudulent companies when it itself engaged in fraudulent activities. The targeting of individuals across this country by CFPB has been an absolute tragedy. And I cannot believe anyone would claim that that is an example of a problem. What the president did in terms of addressing the CFPB was exactly what needed to be done. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I rise to speak to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. You know, this administration got elected based on fraud. It promised that they were going to deliver the Epstein files. They did not do so. They promised that they would cut the cost of groceries on day one. They have not done so. They promised to keep us out of endless wars. They have not done so. They've accelerated that. And so this is a administration based on fraud, led by a fraudster, a gentleman who was convicted of fraud, multiple counts, a gentleman whose organization was convicted of fraud, multiple counts, a gentleman who was charged and convicted of falsifying business records relating to the Stormy Daniels hush money payoff. I know we've forgotten about all of that. It happened so long ago, but this is an administration based on fraud. And as you start, that's how you finish. Also, that is the reason how in the space of 1 year, after being elected into office, this president has increased his net worth by $3 billion. There's some fraud going on in America, and it's not limited only to immigrants in this country. And so what we have after the watchdogs have been removed, I mean, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau stripped of its ability to recover any more money from corporations that duped Americans like it had since 2011. I mean, $3.6 billion recovered by the CFPB to remedy fraud that victimized working people in this country. 7.7 million people in this country received part of that $3.6 billion recovered by CFPB. It has been a very effective agency on behalf of the American people. But one of the first things they did when they got in there is to kill the CFPB. Same way, as was pointed out earlier, that they systematically, intentionally, deliberately got rid of all of the inspectors general for agencies throughout the federal government. Why? So that folks could make that $3 billion within the first year. And if they made $3 billion, what others have made is just astronomical. So it's like the fox guarding the hen house, and there's no eggs in the hen house because of fraud. But it is a serious crime. We need to hold people accountable, including those at the top. And we don't need to use fraud as a pretext to surge thousands of untrained, ill-suited, ill-mannered ICE goons into the streets of Minnesota to continue what they did last week, which was to kill an innocent person. It's impossible to discuss immigration without relating it back to Renee Good, 37-year-old mother, poet, last words she uttered was, "I'm not mad at you." And boom, less than 10 seconds later, she's shot 3 times in the head. While another ICE agent, I don't know if it was the one that shot her or not, that called her a derogatory name after her car had already hit another car after they fired into the car and killed that woman. We can't let that go. You should not let it go. We should be considering legislation that reins in these out-of-control ICE officers. We should be dealing with legislation to hold them accountable for their excesses. And with that, I will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I was just I'll associate myself with the comments from the gentlelady from Wyoming on the CFPB. I think as the only member of Financial Services Committee as well as Judiciary, I think I was able to question Director Chopra on numerous occasions. Completely became a rogue agency, not funded by Congress, funded by a line item in the Fed's budget. And all they did was attack the insurance industry in America, the banking industry in America, and the credit unions of America. That was the function, was to somehow raise revenue by continually fining some of these agencies. So with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to remind folks that Renee Nicole Goods was an American citizen that was shot dead. Kind of reminds me of the 1960s in Kent State. But I want to take a few moments to address my colleague from California as he talked about Social Security fraud. I think he mentioned 1 million instances of fraud reported by the New York Times. I would say that that's probably an undercount. Most undocumented workers, the vast majority, come to this country to work. They're going to find a Social Security number to work under, and they will be hired by somebody who knows that's a false Social Security number because they need workers. And at the end of a few years of working, rest assured that those workers working with a false Social Security number will never reap the benefits that they will have paid into a Social Security system. And on the contrary, there's a lot of studies that show that those payments by these undocumented workers into the Social Security system are part of the reason the Social Security system stays viable to this day. But I also want to remind folks the underlying issue here, which is employees, workers that are needed in this country. Wisconsin, 90% of the dairy workers are undocumented. Meat processing plants throughout the country, the vast majority undocumented, working with fake Social Security numbers. California, my colleague from California, myself, we're Californians. California has the largest manufacturing sector in the United States. We have the largest agricultural industry in the USA. California, the largest high-tech, largest biotech, largest venture capital sectors in the US. Guess who a lot of those workers, the vast majority, they're undocumented. And of course, for all of you that love to pick on California, we send the federal government about $90 billion more in federal revenue than federal benefits that we get back. We're a net donor to the federal government, things that we forget about when we go after California. Actually, our state, despite everything, 4th largest economy in the world, we're doing pretty well. We could do better, but we're doing well. You want to stop the fake ID, fake Social Security numbers? Go mandatory E-Verify. Go after the employer. You want to stop the issue of fake Social Security numbers? You want to stop undocumented workers? Go after the employers, the small businesses in this country that are the backbone of this economy. Let's face it, folks. This country needs the workers. I can't understand why you keep vilifying these workers. Give them a legal way to work, give them a real Social Security number, and I can tell you what's going to happen. The issue of fake IDs, the issue of incorrect Social Security numbers is probably going to disappear pretty quickly. So I ask my colleagues, you pick issues in our economy, in our society, but let's focus on the solution. We've talked about these problems for decades. It's time to do something. And this is not what we need to do. Go after the employers, go after the backbone of this economy. I would say that's not the right thing to do either. Thank you.
The gentleman yield.
Yes, I'll yield.
For a question, but one farmer said to me that you get an ICE raid bust at a farm. Now you've driven all the undocumenteds off of that farm and neighboring farms. There's not enough workers to do the work, so the farmers have to pay double or, certainly time and a half, but double or triple to get them to work through the weekends and so on. And those prices get passed on to consumers at the grocery store because there aren't enough workers to do the work anymore. Is that your sense of what's going on there?
Yes, Mr. Ranking Member, and I would say further that if you look at the price of groceries today, the price of meat going through the roof. Why? Because you have a supply is getting choked off, whether the processing plant or otherwise. This is a challenge. We got to do the right thing from an economic perspective. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. I'll now recognize myself. Sometimes the frustration here comes from the very comments of your colleagues. Mr. Johnson, I appreciate that you have a lot of opinions related to this administration. I wish you had spoken more as to the fundamentals of this bill. This bill attempts to rein in and expedite the removal of people who commit fraud, such as the massive amount of fraud costing $10 billion and counting in Minnesota. Quite frankly, mentioning various states, my colleague from Orange County just mentioned California multiple times. If it's $10 billion in Minnesota, it's 20, 30, 40 billion dollars in California. You can bet on it. So the idea that we would be able to expeditiously—
The gentleman yield.
I will in a minute, deal with people who commit fraud is certainly the item that we have here. Do we really need to hunt down Al Capone and prove that he's tax evading after decades of knowing that he was the leader of organized crime in order to deport him or arrest him? In this case, the alternative for many of these fraudsters would be expedited removal rather than an extended period of time of hospitality in one of our prisons. But I do want to move on to what my colleague from California said, and then I'll give him time to respond. He talked about the shortage of farm labor. I'll tell you about the shortage of farm labor. I have an agricultural district stretching from the Mexican border just east of San Diego for more than 100 miles east and 100 miles north. Massive amounts of agriculture. And during the 4 years of the Biden administration, when 10 million people came into this country illegally or were put on parole and calling it legally, did our farmers suddenly have an excess of labor? No. The fact is, Mr. Correa is right. Yes, we need to have an effective working agricultural labor program, including guest worker. But we don't have it now, we haven't had it, and for 20 plus years, I have asked, along with some of my colleagues, including a former member of this committee, Howard Berman, to come up with an organized way to do it. Flooding the market with illegals or deporting illegals, neither one changes the basic premise of agriculture, which is they're not getting a guest worker program that works for them, and people, in fact, go to the farm, but then they go elsewhere. So the idea that if we deport 5 or 6 or 10 million people out of the 20 million plus that are here illegally, that somehow it's going to be devastating to agriculture simply isn't true. Agriculture had that problem 25 years ago when I came here as a freshman, and George W. Bush tried mightily to help. And I would reach out, and I'll yield time to my colleague, and say, do you want to get serious about an effective guest program that replaces H-2, that actually does something where you get the labor on time, verifiable? If you do, let's work on that. But let's not blame deporting people who have committed crimes for a shortage of labor. And I would yield to my friend from Orange County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like we actually begin to agree on some facts. And
Lou, we agree on a lot.
Some of the needs of
we just
this
have to get our
economy.
leadership with us.
And I will work with you. Remember, a lot of those farmers, farm workers, I should say, have been in this country 20, 30 years, still waiting to see an adjustment of status. We passed a farm worker modernization bill a few years ago. Didn't make it out of the Senate. So we somehow know what this economy needs. We know that those workers are desperate to work legally in this country, but we can't get there. And those employers, those people that grow our food, those small manufacturers, those high-tech workers that rely on those foreign immigrants to work in their high-tech firms, they're all asking for help. We're not giving it to them.
Well, in reclaiming my time,
Yes.
I will join with you on that. I would suggest that we dust off the Ag Jobs program from Howard Berman and use it as a starting point. And if you want to go beyond Ag and work with our senior ranking member on the committee, I'm sure that she would be happy to join a California group that would include high tech. What we have today, as I yield back, is something dealing with people who are committing crimes and fraud, and hopefully we will get back to that. And with that, I yield back and recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose this measure because people who commit crimes are already removable. This, without the need for prosecution, would simply say you can go to any field in the 18th Congressional District and round everybody up and do expedited removal, because a majority of the farm workers in the United States, including my district, are undocumented. And a majority of those undocumented workers have been here more than 10 years. So we've already got a crisis in the ag world. There have been news accounts in Central California about farms that are unable to have their crops harvested. The crops are rotting in the fields because people are afraid to come out and pick the crops because of the enforcement activity that's already going on. This bill would make that crisis even more acute. Now, we had a bill, we have a bipartisan bill, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, that has passed the House of Representatives twice with bipartisan support. Not only does it streamline the H-2A program, it was supported by hundreds of agricultural employers and was also worked on by the United Farm Workers Union. Both groups endorsed the measure. It expands the H-2A program. Not only does it streamline it, but it allows certain industries that have been excluded, for example, the dairy industry, to utilize the program, and it also provides for transition to legal status for the undocumented workers, first to a certified agricultural worker status, and then at the option of the immigrant to apply for legal residence after a period of time as an ag worker, or they can stay as an ag worker. That is something that we should take up again and pass. And as I mentioned, I think at our last hearing, our late colleague Doug LaMalva was one of the individuals who worked very hard on the bill and brought a farmer's perspective so that we could have a measure that would really work. So I would like to mention that that bill has been reintroduced in this Congress. We're hoping that the Senate can get organized and move it forward, and it would solve a lot of problems. This bill, however, would aggravate an already very serious problem. And I just would like to mention, while we're talking about this bill, what we're not talking about is the need to have oversight on the activities that ICE officers are engaging in communities across the United States. I think we all saw the video of the killing of the mother in Minnesota. It was so upsetting to see that. But I'm also seeing now videos of ICE agents going door to door and breaking into homes without warrants. I mean, a measure of how serious you are about the Constitution is to imagine if these were your constituents that this was happening to. If the federal government were going after gun owners door to door and breaking down their doors, would you be concerned about the Fourth Amendment? I think you would be. So I think it's past time for this committee to have aggressive oversight over the aggressive, and I'd say in many cases, unconstitutional and unlawful actions that are being taken in the name of us through these rather untrained ICE agents. And I'll just say, when I went home over the weekend, a friend of mine who is a police officer told me that no one in his department would have done what that officer did relative to shooting that woman. And he was ashamed, not of himself, but of the disfavor that those officers, untrained as they are bringing to otherwise, very well-trained, respected police officers who we count on to keep us safe and who operate within the law and within the Constitution. So I think we would be well advised to spend some time on that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady, and as we consider a hearing like that, I'm sure it would include the question of whether or not local police should have been on the scene rather than deliberately thwarting ICE and not doing their job. If they had been there, it could have been different. With that, we recognize the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield to my friend from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman.
Thank you. I just want to read the summary of this bill. This bill creates a ground of inadmissibility and a ground of removability or deportability for aliens who admit to or are convicted of certain fraud, offenses, or the unlawful receipt of a federal, state, or local public benefit. The bill also makes the described aliens ineligible for immigration relief in the United States. I cannot imagine why anybody in their right mind would oppose that bill. I cannot imagine why anyone would think that it was appropriate to allow people who commit fraud to stay in this country. I cannot imagine how this could even be controversial, that if you are in this country and you commit fraud, that you are not immediately deportable. I also want to note that it is legal to own guns in the United States of America. It is illegal to commit fraud. That's the difference between the two. I also want to challenge my colleagues on the other side. If you actually cared about the ag industry, if you actually cared about our farmers and ranchers, you would work with us every day to try to lift the incredible regulatory burdens that you have imposed on that industry. Between the Biden administration, the Obama administration, the effort by the Democrats in Congress to absolutely destroy our ag industry has been legion. The effort to impose taxes against our cattle producers, the efforts to force DEF, destroying our diesel industry. I mean, every single move that I have seen the Democrats take in the last 25 years has been contrary to the best interests of our farmers and ranchers, and yet they're going to sit here today and lament the fact that we are saying, if you come into this country and you commit fraud, we're kicking you out. That is what they're going to focus on, is the impact on the ag industry. That is just an effort to completely deflect attention from what we're really trying to do here, which is get rid of fraudsters. What we have seen in Minnesota, what we see in California.
Would the gentlewoman yield?
No, I will not. what we have seen in California, what we see in Minnesota, what we have seen from these various fraudsters, what they are doing to our country. I was just meeting with an Indian tribe trying to find a way to resolve a long-standing water dispute that is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have numerous of those situations in this country where we need to resolve long-standing water disputes and reserved water rights. And you know what? We don't have the money. The country doesn't have the money to resolve those matters and address those needs on those reservations because you have people in Minnesota and California and others who are here who have defrauded our government to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. How could it be anything but common sense to require or to force somebody who commits fraud in our country, steals from our taxpayers, steals from our farmers and ranchers, steals from our farmers and ranchers, steals from our ag industry, steals from other people? Why in the world would you want to keep them in this country? Why in the world would it not be automatic to deport them and get rid of them? With that, I yield back.
Would the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
I'd like to ask the gentlelady a question. We were both here during the previous administration when we had 10 million more workers. Did we see inflation go down?
No, it went up.
Did we see an availability of farm workers leading to lower cost?
Absolutely not.
So is there anything that has this idea that removal of fraud committing individuals in an expedited way somehow would be adverse versus bringing in fraudsters from around the world in an unchecked fashion?
Well, I just have one comment. One of the primary areas of fraud in Minnesota relates to the so-called learning centers or daycare centers. Yet 80% of the Somali population in Minnesota is on welfare. Why do they have all of these daycare centers? Why are they not taking care of their own children if they are on welfare, if they are not working? That gives you an idea of the relationship between employment and fraud. They have nothing to do with each other.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. Recognize the gentlelady from Washington.
Thank you, Mr.
To
Chairman.
strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there's a lot here. There is a lot here. And I will have an amendment later about the underlying problem with this bill. The gentlelady on the other side is asking, wouldn't you want to do this? Well, yeah, there is something in the Constitution called due process. It's in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. It applies to everybody, citizens and non-citizens. And this bill doesn't even require conviction. So yeah, we're going to talk about all the reasons why the bill doesn't make sense. But the other thing about this is that fraud, so-called fraud, is being used to unleash a federalized military force on the United States of America and its citizens and residents. That's what's happening. And that's what's happening in Minnesota. 2,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents in the state of Minnesota, supposedly under all this fraud and these terrible people that are doing terrible things. Minnesota has one of the smallest populations of undocumented immigrants, by the way. It's only 100,000 people. And most of the people that are in Minnesota are US citizens, 60% born in the United States. Green card holders, people who are here because the United States of America is supposed to be a nation of immigrants. And what is happening right now in Minnesota is stunning to me. And I wish that Chairman Jordan were here in the room because we have worked very closely on issues of civil liberties, privacy, protections. And I'll remind you of another amendment of the Constitution that applies to citizens and non-citizens alike, and that is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says that you can't go battering your way into somebody's house without a warrant from a judge. That is about privacy protections for every single person in the United States of America. And so I want to play a video right now of what we just saw in Minnesota. You can end the video, and I will tell you that it is horrific. I would encourage everybody to watch the whole thing. What they gave her was a warrant from ICE, which is extremely different. That allows you to pick somebody up on the street in a public place. It does not allow you to bash somebody's door in. And every single one of you on the other side, do not be silent on this. We have worked together on privacy issues. We have protected in a bipartisan way, sometimes against our own leaderships, on those issues. This is the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. And the Judiciary Committee should be looking at this. Do you want to give absolute impunity to these ICE agents, these Border Patrol agents, to use fraud, to use anything that they say, to go after your constituents, to bash in the doors of your constituents without a warrant? Does anybody on that side want to stand up and defend that? Does anybody want to stand up and defend going against the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States? Because that is what you saw. You can look at that video, you can look at that paper that was presented to that woman.
The general lady
and that paper was not, you have your time, you can claim it now, that paper was not a warrant
The gentle lady's
that
time has
allowed
expired.
anyone to
The
bash
gentle
in
lady's
the
time
doors.
has expired.
And that is why I hope that
I
this
thank the gentle
committee
lady.
will take this
Does anyone
up
else seek
in a
recognition?
serious way. I yield back.
Okay, I see no one else seeking recognition. Do you have an amendment, as I understand? Oh, I'm sorry. The gentleman from California is recognized next to strike the last
Well,
one.
Mr. Chairman, first I'd remind my colleague that there's a very well-established legal process to assure that our laws are not being abused, and that is being taken seriously by all of the advocacy groups for these illegal immigrants. But I want to address a more fundamental question. In an article last July, Axios published an article entitled, "There Needs to Be Blood. Democrats voters tell them to get shot in Trump resistance push." Well, that bloodlust has been turned against ICE officers enforcing the law over the past year. A member of this House even doxed an ICE agent to a violent mob in Carpinteria, California, who then set upon him with rocks and sent him to the hospital. An assassination team of leftists launched a coordinated attack on an ICE facility, wounding an ICE agent and, ironically, killing an illegal migrant in their custody. Violent attacks on ICE agents have increased more than 1,300% in the last year. There has been a 3,200% increase in vehicular assaults against ICE officers. Doxing of ICE agents for the purpose of harassing them and their families has become a common practice among the left. I've spoken to many of them. They don't want to wear masks. They have to protect themselves and their families. And now we have the tragic death of Nicole Good, a leftist activist in Minneapolis. Now, the Democrats tell us not to believe our own eyes, but that takes a special kind of gullibility when so many video images exist. And what they clearly show is an ICE vehicle attempting to leave a near riot condition dominated by an increasingly violent mob. A left-wing activist pulls her car in front of the ICE vehicle, blocking its path. Uniformed ICE agents then issue a lawful order for her to exit her car. Instead of complying with this order, she shifts into reverse, tearing the agent's hand from the door and then throws it into drive and hits the gas as the car is aimed directly at another officer, grazing him as he fires into the vehicle. Now, her apologists on the left say she was simply fleeing arrest. She didn't deserve to be shot. But that's not why she was shot. She was shot because an ICE officer had a split second to assess the lethal threat of a 2,000-pound vehicle a few feet away and accelerating toward him. As we watch these violent attacks on ICE officers and the performance of their duties, we have to ask ourselves what gives people like Nicole Good and the others in these violent mobs The idea that it's perfectly okay to attack ICE officers, obstruct the enforcement of federal laws, and place themselves in danger when they do so. Where do they get these ideas? Perhaps it's exactly the kind of rhetoric we've just heard from our Democratic colleagues. One just called our ICE officers goons. Another just called them an occupying force. Well, what are we to make of that? An occupying force was entirely legitimate to take up arms against an occupying force, but that's exactly the opposite of what ICE actually is. ICE is not an occupying force. Rather, it is faithfully enforcing the laws as Congress has written them. But the Democrats have repeatedly suggested, including in this room today, that they're an occupying force, in the words of the former Democratic chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. How many Democrats in this House have called ICE murderers, Gestapo, Nazi stormtroopers? I've lost count. Most people see these statements as ravings of demagogues, and indeed they are. But there's a lunatic fringe in our society that hangs on their every word and acts on those words. Nicole Good lost her life listening to such drivel, taking it seriously, and then acting on it by actively obstructing federal law enforcement by blocking their path, refusing lawful orders, and ultimately accelerating her car toward other officers standing nearby. What her intentions were is irrelevant. What the officers saw and reacted to is quite clear. So for the sake of your own supporters, I appeal to my Democratic colleagues to weigh their words more carefully, consider the impact they're having on a gullible and unstable fringe in their base. And I'll repeat to them what I said the other day, Abraham Lincoln's words to the Democrats of his day. There is no grievance that is a fit object for redress by mob law. I again remind my Democratic colleagues that ICE is faithfully enforcing the laws that this Congress wrote. If you don't like them, you sit in the very institution with the power to change them. All you have to do is make your case to the American people that our borders should again be open to millions of migrants, and we should change our laws to accommodate this. But in a nation that exists by the rule of law, you cannot ignore those laws or vilify, attack, and even assault the very officials who are enforcing them. It's stunning that members of the House Judiciary Committee need to be reminded of this. I yield back.
Well said. The gentleman yields back. I think the gentlelady from North Carolina was next in the queue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just was reflecting a little bit on the 5th anniversary of January 6th and how history is being rewritten by this administration. I'm very proud that my senior senator, a Republican, has insisted on having the January 6th plaque displayed, because even though we may not agree on politics all the time, we certainly agree on the truth. And with that, I yield the balance of my time to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I couldn't disagree more with the gentleman from California's characterization of the events that happened in Minnesota last week, and continue. But it does point to the fact that when we disagree about whether ICE is faithfully enforcing or executing the laws of the United States as opposed to executing Americans, it's all the more important that this committee engage in oversight and hearings so that we can clarify the facts, particularly when there's been this rush to judgment and everybody's engaging in confirmation bias. So I just disagree with so much that was just said. But again, if we were having a full and fair investigation, then we might be in a very different place. Look, the reason I sought to be recognized when our colleague from Wyoming was speaking was she repeatedly said that why would anyone oppose deportation of people who are committing fraud in the United States? And I think it's really important that we clarify that no one is opposing deportation of people who commit fraud, assuming they're actually convicted of committing fraud. That's already the law. Nobody's opposing that. What she critically left out, and what many of our colleagues have left out of their characterization here, is the word allegedly. Just because someone accuses you of a crime that is a deportable offense doesn't mean that you committed it. And in the atmosphere that we're currently in, where we're seeing false accusations being made on a daily basis, I think it's even more important that we're standing up for the Fifth Amendment and for due process to make sure that people are not being railroaded and unjustly accused and deported and imprisoned in
Will the gentlelady yield?
Of issues. No, I'm going to yield back to Ms. Rock.
Yield.
I'm sorry. Yes, to Ms. Jayapal?
I yield, you can yield to her. She can have the rest of my time, and you can
You have to
work
do
it
it
out.
as the owner of the time. You have to.
Yes, it's fine.
Thank you. I just wanted to very quickly say, because Chairman Jordan is back in the chair, that we have worked very closely together on privacy issues with FISA. We've taken on our own leaderships on both sides, and I would just ask you, Mr. Chairman, to look at that video of ICE agents and Border Patrol battering down the door of a resident in Minneapolis without a warrant, because, as you well know, the Fourth Amendment protects us from search and seizure, illegal search and seizure, and this is an issue, I think, that we should be able to have the same privacy coalition take on, despite what the president is saying about these things. There are certain places where our values as members of the Judiciary Committee, and you've been very strong on this on privacy, have to come first, despite whatever rhetoric is going on. And I'll tell you, they can do that in Minnesota, they can do it in Ohio, they can do it in Washington, they can do it in any one of the states. And you might like who they're doing it to today, you may not like who they're doing it to tomorrow. And we have stuck together in making sure that we don't allow it to happen to just some people. Even in FISA, we've done that. And I think we need to do that in this case, and so I would ask you to work with me to make sure we take on the Fourth Amendment at this point in a very serious way, given what we just saw. And I yield back to the gentlelady from North Carolina.
I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and I appreciate the comments from the gentlelady from Washington, and I will take a look at that video. I apologize, I had a quick 10-minute meeting I had to go to.
I just have an inquiry of the chair.
Yep.
This is the second time that Ms. Jayapal's played a video. She played one last week, I think. I have no idea where these videos come from. I have no idea if they're verified. We have no background on them. And you solicited a response directly from the majority. And again, it looks like any other episode of Cops. I have no idea where this stuff is coming from or what the basis is of it. And I just was running if the committee could at least check these out ahead of time.
Fair enough.
Delete the profanity, too.
Yeah, well said. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized, and then we'll go to the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to the gentlelady from Wyoming.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to read the bill itself, and it states that there's been allegations that you don't even have to have a conviction for these deportation orders. It specifically states that you do. It says right in the bill. I mean, you can read it yourself if anybody's interested in going to the actual language of what we're debating. Defrauding the United States government or the unlawful receipt of public benefits. Any alien who has been convicted of or who admits having committed or who admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of a variety of different types of fraud. That's subsection AJ, and then you look at BG, deportability, defrauding the United States government or the unlawful receipt of public benefits. Any alien who has been convicted of or who admits having committed or who admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of certain types of fraud. So I don't understand how in the world you're saying that we don't have to have a conviction or an admission of guilt. I also want to describe just some of the fraud that we're talking about here.
Do you wish to engage in a colloquy or no?
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Wyoming.
Okay, will you yield? I mean, you asked a question.
No, I have a few other things
Time
that I want
belongs
to address
to
here.
me.
That's right. Time belongs to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
In May 2025, a Cuban national was sentenced to prison for his role in a scheme to defraud Medicare of more than $3.2 million through a sham durable medical equipment company. In February 2025, federal law enforcement officers arrested 5 illegal aliens who allegedly used information from skimmed electronic benefit transfer cards to clone counterfeit cards and steal funds that had been dispersed to low-income individuals by the state of California. In 2019, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Mississippi Mississippi announced the prosecution of 119 illegal aliens for crimes including misusing Social Security numbers of American citizens. In June 2025, an ICE worksite enforcement operation in Nebraska uncovered approximately 70 illegal aliens who were using stolen Social Security numbers and identities to unlawfully obtain wages, health benefits, and employment authorization, which affected more than 100 victims. Medicare, SNAP, and Social Security, all programs that millions of Americans rely on for assistance, are being defrauded, leaving citizens unable to obtain necessary benefits while also contributing to runaway spending. Waste, fraud, and abuse within these programs symbolize nothing more than the blatant theft from the American people. If someone engages in this kind of fraud and they are convicted, or they admit they committed these acts, they should be defrauded. That's all the bill does. All of the discussion about ICE is just a red herring and an attempt to deflect attention from what the majority is attempting to do, which is to protect the American citizen. That's who we're trying to protect. With that, I yield back to Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it is about time that this happened. So as someone who is right adjacent to the Twin Cities, my district is just 15 miles away. I've seen these stories for a long time, and this has been going on for years. And I would urge people to check out a blog called Powerline blog. They have been writing about this for years. This is not something that's new. And what is new? In the last year, we had a president who took this seriously, who said that this fraud cannot continue. And we cannot continue to have these people with long rap sheets that are just running around the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And by the way, it matters because just 15 miles away, sometimes they cross the border, and we've seen a police officer killed by someone from Minnesota after a high-speed chase. So we see these type of things, and it spills out around the rest of the country. But this is not new. This has been going on for a long time. And I would urge all of you that averted your eyes to what has been going on in Minneapolis and Minnesota generally. I would urge you to go back and look at what has just been a trail of fraud that has been going on for far longer than just the last year. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my colleagues from Wisconsin and Wyoming for returning to the actual subject matter of this markup. My Democrat colleagues seem to want to focus on vilifying an ICE agent who was seriously injured just a year ago by an illegal alien driving a vehicle, vilifying that ICE officer who defended himself by being assaulted by a lethal weapon, a moving vehicle accelerating toward him. But one of my colleagues earlier said that this, this is just this bill is just because of the fraud in Minnesota. While the fraud in Minnesota is not unique and it's not a one-time occurrence, it is unique in its size and scope. What one prosecutor called industrial level fraud, over $9 billion. But there are other examples. In May of 2025, a Cuban national was sentenced to prison for his role in defrauding Medicare of more than $3.2 million in a sham durable medical equipment scheme. In February 2025, federal officers arrested 5 illegal aliens who were using cloned EBT cards to steal funds that had been dispersed to low-income individuals in California. And of course, illegal aliens all the time commit fraud in entering and remaining in this country with illegal documents and others. It has become clear that the Biden administration created a system ridden with corruption. This eroded public trust and hammered American taxpayers, and it needs to be fixed. That's why I am proud to be an original co-sponsor of this bill. This is common sense legislation that will ensure that illegal aliens who defraud the United States taxpayer of benefits are held accountable through deportation and inadmissibility. Blue state mismanagement should not force taxpayers in states like mine to foot the bill. This abuse must stop, and this legislation is a critical step forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized for, I think she has an amendment.
I do. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in
Without
the
objection, the
nature.
amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would simply require a conviction before a green card holder is deported. Once again, my colleagues across the aisle are looking for a new way to connect immigrants and crime, this time making people deportable and inadmissible for crimes against, however, deportable and inadmissible without a conviction. This amendment would add due process back in and would require a conviction prior to deportation, which is in line with most other criminal deportability grounds currently on the books. It appears that the bill was drafted in response to Republicans' obsession with a fraud investigation related in Minnesota. Let's remember that investigation actually started under the Biden administration in 2022. Over 90 people have been charged, at least 59 have been convicted. And the controversy actually exploded in late December when right-wing YouTuber Nick Shirley posted a video visiting child care centers in Minnesota, harassing workers and claiming he uncovered evidence of fraud. A CBS News analysis found that all of the daycare centers in Mr. Shirley's video had been visited by state regulators within the past 6 months. The Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families Office of the Inspector General conducted on-site compliance checks at 9 of the 10 childcare sites targeted in the video and reported that all were operating as expected. The 10th had closed in 2022. The type of conduct that this bill is seeking to penalize is already a crime involving moral turpitude, which can render somebody deportable or inadmissible from the country. In Jordan v. DeGeorge, a Supreme Court case decided in 1951, the court held that, quote, the phrase crime involving moral turpitude has without exception been construed to embrace fraudulent conduct. The opinion stated unequivocally that in every deportation case where fraud has been proved, federal courts have held that the crime in issue involved moral turpitude. The court even addressed the idea of statutory ambiguity, declaring that Congress sufficiently forewarned respondent that the statutory consequence of twice conspiring to defraud the United States is deportation. But for a green card holder to be deported for a crime involving moral turpitude, you do need to be convicted. You do need to have due process, and you actually need to be convicted of the crime. Under this bill, it is just very important to recognize that there is no conviction needed. And this has been the playbook of Republicans from the start of this Congress, is to take something that there's already consequences that exist. You can already deport people who are convicted for these various things. But then to say, we no longer need a conviction. We're just going to deport people, put them into expedited removal without any conviction. That means without real due process. And I think that is extremely dangerous. It is a way to criminalize immigrants in a much broader way and essentially strip people of the right to due process. And remember that these folks are green card holders. And I think it is absolutely critical that we preserve the ability to ensure that somebody is convicted before they are put into expedited removal and deportation proceedings. A non-citizen doesn't need to be convicted of a crime to be found inadmissible under current law. A non-citizen must be convicted to be found deportable in most circumstances. This bill would render a non-citizen deportable without a conviction. They would not even need to be charged for a crime. And so, as a result, a green card holder who has lived in the country for decades could be deported from the country without even being convicted or even charged with a crime. And so this, I think, is a very important requirement that we should have to ensure that there is a conviction before we deport people.
Will the gentlelady yield?
I would.
Well, thank you so much for this clarifying amendment, which I think now actually speaks for both sides of the aisle. As I understood the comments of the gentlelady from Wyoming, she was saying she thought that the legislation does require a conviction. So she was reading the two different possibilities as being in the conjunctive rather than the disjunctive. And what you're saying is read them in the conjunctive. You need to have a conviction. If there are other things that you want to throw in, fine, but there's got to be at the very least a criminal conviction, which is completely consistent with the standards of American law.
That's exactly right. And so I hope that we would get full support for this amendment.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman withdraws his point of order and is recognized, gentleman from California, to speak on the amendment.
Thank you. First of all, as I understood the gentlelady from Wyoming, she said that the bill requires a conviction or an admission of guilt, which is exactly what the bill says. Contrary to the Democrats' talking points, not every ground of inadmissibility and removability in the Immigration and Nationality Act requires a conviction. In fact, the language here is identical to the grounds of inadmissibility for crimes involving moral turpitude and controlled substance abuse under the INA. Ms. Jayapal's amendment does one thing. This bill says if you admit to fraud, you're deportable. The amendment removes this provision. The amendment says even if the alien admits to the fraud, they can remain here indefinitely. You know, that's absurd. The current law is so ambiguous that even conviction is not sufficient for deportation or inadmissibility. I cited a number of cases in my opening. In one case where an individual who committed an aggravated felony was allowed to stay in this country despite a conviction in a $169,000 food stamp scheme. In another case, an alien was placed in removal proceedings in 2005. He remained there until 2013, when his case finally made its way to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit to determine whether his conviction for conspiracy to traffic in identification documents made him removable from the United States. Another fraudster spent 2 years challenging his removal proceedings, even though he had admitted that he had received up to $3.5 million through food stamp fraud.
Will the gentleman
These are the people that the Democrats want to protect and to have remain in the United States. These are the people they allowed in by the millions during the 4 years of the open borders policy of the Biden administration.
Will the gentleman yield?
I think that this makes very clear the Democrats' position on this issue, and I thank them for clarifying it for the American people. And be happy to yield to the gentleman.
Mr. McClellan, I think what you're kind of beating around the bushes here is that my friends on the left, they want absolutely no restriction on admission and full restriction on removal. And there's a lot of talk about we must have a conviction before we can even discuss removal. But I would remind the gentleman, what do sanctuary policies, what do left-leaning policies preclude? They don't charge people. They don't prosecute people. They don't investigate folks. And so I would just raise, just for your consideration and the consideration of the committee, if you do not have aggressive law enforcement, if you do not investigate the criminal activity that is so obvious in these immigrant communities, not all, but the obvious criminal wrongdoing, you will never get a conviction. If you never get a conviction, according to the other side, you cannot remove. And to the gentleman's point, millions and millions and millions of folks came into this country over the last 4 years, and the amount of crime that has come because of that, it cannot be overstated. And if we are going to be required to investigate, prosecute, and convict every illegal immigrant, we will be here for centuries. And that's the game that they're trying to play here, and I respect the gentleman's summation of it.
I appreciate that. In reclaiming my time, I point out that we have a colleague from Minnesota who said yesterday that we should not be investigating any of these crimes in Minnesota. That seems to be the position of the radical left of the Democratic Party, which seems to be taking over that party every day. But to the gentleman's point, I would say that this bill is actually very, very restrictive. It simply says there will be deportability or inadmissibility if an individual is convicted or at least admits to that crime. That's all the bill does. And what this amendment does is say, no, it doesn't matter if they confess to the crime, we're still not going to remove them until years and years of court proceedings, if those court proceedings take place in these sanctuary jurisdictions where the gentleman is spot on in his concerns. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. To move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's
First of all, what the prior speaker and others are attributing to the Democrats actually was the proposal of the Republican congressman who introduced this originally, Mr. Jordan's colleague from Ohio, Mr. Taylor. And he was the one who introduced legislation saying any alien who has been convicted of a crime shall be deported. So there's nothing remotely radical about that proposition. What is a dilution of the constitutional standard is rather adding in this language about admitting to actions that could constitute an offense, right? I mean, go to the ICE agent in Minnesota, who presumably must admit to the fact that he shot Ms. Good 3 times in the head. Well, that could be murder. Would we just declare him guilty of murder without actually having a trial and looking at all potential defenses, without looking at what the burden of proof actually requires to be shown there? So it strikes me that they're trying to sneak into this language something which is really at odds with the way we have traditionally done this, which is by requiring an actual conviction. And that is not some kind of radical Democrat plan. That has been the standard jurisprudence within this field, and I believe that that was the way that Mr. Taylor originally introduced this legislation, and it's only in the ANS that the new language has been introduced. And I'm happy to yield to the gentlelady from Washington.
I thank the ranking member. That's exactly the point I was going to raise. I'm looking at the original text of the bill introduced by Mr. Taylor in March of 2025. And in that, the original author, a Republican, not a radical left-wing Democrat, whatever you want to call us, not any one of us, but he, your Republican colleague, introduced the exact language that my amendment would take us back to. So please be careful when you accuse us of being radical, because actually there are a lot of Republicans across this country who share the view that you should have a conviction before you're deported. And I think that this, the idea, I just remind you again, just like the issue I raised about the Fourth Amendment battering down the door, you might like who it's being done to today. Wait until it's done to some green card holder in your district. And you have to explain to your constituents why you are consistently voting to take away a conviction. So I would just say that I would look at the original bill. All my amendment does is return it to that standard. And I yield back to the ranking member.
Well, thank you very much to the gentlelady. And in fact, Congressman Taylor's original language in H.R. 1958 closely tracks the distinction that is operated within this field of law, which is when it deals with inadmissibility, there is that disjunctive operation. So any alien who's been convicted of, who admits having committed or who admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of an offense, et cetera. But that's in the first part relating to inadmissibility. Then you get to deportability, and that's where the gentleman says, any alien who's been convicted of an offense that involves defrauding the government or the unlawful receipt of a federal public benefit, and so on. So that's a common sense interpretation that is protective of a basic due process concept here. I think it's kind of beneath the debate to try to attribute this to radical ideological polar divisions when it's the Republican congressman who actually introduced legislation, who built the precise principle of the gentlelady's amendment into the legislation. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Washington. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the
Roll call
amendment is
vote,
not
Mr.
agreed to. The roll call being requested, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes yes. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes yes. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes yes. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen votes yes. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes yes. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes yes. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes yes. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes yes. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes yes. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes yes. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes yes. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett? Ms. Hageman, you are not recorded. Ms. Hageman votes no. Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Chairman, there are 11 ayes and 14 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to. Question occurs on the bill amendment in nature of a substitute. Actually, let me get to the script. Question on the adoption of the amendment in nature of a substitute. This will be followed immediately by a vote on favorably reporting the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is on favorably reporting the bill as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably. Roll call being requested. The clerk will call the roll on the bill.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes aye. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes aye. Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes aye. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes aye. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes aye. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes aye. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes aye. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes aye. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes aye. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes aye. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes aye. Mr. Gill? Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes no. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes no. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen votes no. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes no. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes no. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes no. Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes no. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes no. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes no. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett? Mr. Issa, you're not recorded. Mr. Issa votes yes. Mr. Gill votes yes. Mr. Moore votes yes. Ms. Scanlon, you are not recorded. Ms. Scanlon votes no.
Clerk report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 11 noes.
The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. Without objection, the bill will be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute, incorporating all adopted amendments, and staff is authorized to make technical changes, technical and conforming changes. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 6978, the Preserving Integrity and Immigration Benefits Act, for purposes of markup, and move the committee reported favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 6978.
Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for an opening statement.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, in recent weeks, our nation has watched in horror as several high-profile fraud scandals have come to light. Billions of dollars directed to helping those in need and funded by hardworking American taxpayers have instead been stolen by illicit fraudsters. In some cases, these schemes have involved foreign nationals or even communities with a large number of naturalized citizens. This has understandably raised questions about whether the same kinds of fraudulent criminal activity being perpetrated against our nation's generous welfare system are also being perpetrated against our nation's immigration benefits system. Indeed, in response to the massive amounts of fraudulent activity, the Trump administration has taken immediate action, pausing the adjudication of all pending immigration benefits for foreign nationals who hail from countries the administration has identified as being at a higher risk of likelihood that their nationals would pose a national security or public safety risk to the United States. Among the reasons a country might be identified as high risk are woeful inadequacies in screening, vetting, and the provision of information, such as criminal records that are widely unreliable and inaccessible, and widespread corruption combined with poor record keeping, resulting in any non-citizen being able to obtain any civil document from that country, particularly if that person is willing to pay a fee or engage in an individual who specializes in assisting such fraud. What they're already uncovering is shocking. In September, the Trump administration surged resources to review immigration applications in Minneapolis. This investigation uncovered evidence of fraud, noncompliance, or public safety or national security concerns in 44% of the cases interviewed. The cases included marriage fraud and forged documents. In addition to pausing the adjudication of pending immigration benefits requests, the Trump administration has ordered a re-review of all benefits issued from such high-risk countries since Joe Biden's Democrats opened our borders on January 20th of 2021. Such a requirement is essential to restoring the public's trust in our immigration system. This review will ensure a wide range of immigration benefits, from employment authorization documents to asylum applications and various visa petitions, or even naturalization applications, were not fraudulently obtained and that applicable standards were appropriately applied during adjudication. Mr. Finstead's legislation, the Preserving Integrity and Immigration Benefits Act, is simple and will codify this review process. Further, H.R. 6978 will ensure that both Congress and the public will be informed about what the administration uncovers. I can't possibly imagine why anyone would oppose this legislation. And again, I'm afraid we're about to find out. With that, I yield.
Would the gentleman yield?
We're on opening statements, but I'll get to you first.
Thank you.
When we get to member 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the ranking member for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. On my way here this morning, I got a call from a constituent who was supposed to have her long-awaited citizenship interview And she showed up at it, and the officer told her it had been descheduled with no explanation of why it had been descheduled. And that descheduling process has been the basis, actually, for then later attacking people's presence in the country as they're no longer on the schedule that they thought they were on. Well, this bill tells us just how much some people hate immigration in all of its forms, including legal immigration. I thought that was something that we could agree on. You know, it's always been my position we should make it much harder for people to get into America illegally and much easier to get into America legally. But this is an attack on immigration in all of its guises, including legal immigration. The bill purports to authorize a review of all immigration benefits, rights, and privileges approved during the last 5 years for individuals from countries that President Trump has unilaterally decided to place on his latest discriminatory travel ban policy, which includes the case of every green card holder who was issued a green card and every person who was actually granted citizenship. So the legislation creates administratively, legislatively, and then administratively, a second class of U.S. citizenship, U.S. citizens whose citizenship is called into question for completely political and ideological reasons. So you want to know why we oppose it? We oppose it because under the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause, we don't round up certain citizens considered second class and then subject them to administrative scrutiny that others don't have to go through. In fact, a lot of our Constitution is organized around the principle of settled expectations, which this legislation is designed to disrupt and to combat. Think about the Bill of Attainder Clause, which says that Congress can't just designate certain persons somehow as outside of the law. Think about the ex post facto clause, which is we don't go back and turn something into a crime after it's already happened. Think of the rule of naturalization itself. Congress has the power under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, not one that is turned on and turned off according to the politically correct nature of the group that ended up getting citizenship or ended up getting a green card. And yet the whole purpose here is to designate an inferior group of people, separate and unequal, whose immigration benefits are actually not their immigration benefits necessarily, whose citizenship is not their citizenship necessarily, but must be subject to constant administrative probing and second guessing. So we're going to oppose this, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
We need to get on the ANS.
Oh, that's right. We got to do ANS. The gentleman from California is recognized. Let me back up. Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read, shall be considered base text for purposes of amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California to explain the amendment.
Well, hold your breath. This amendment strikes a period and does not change the substance of the underlying bill. I yield back.
Okay, the gentleman yields back. Now the gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the gentleman from California please yield? Can you?
I believe the gentleman holds the time.
Yield for, are you going to ask him for a question?
I want to ask you a question. Yield for a question. Yeah. Who are the countries that would be included here? Which are the countries?
Well, I don't have the list right in front of me, but as I said, the criteria are very clear. Those that have been woefully inadequate in vetting the backgrounds of the individuals or that are okay, here we go. Angola, Afghanistan, Antigua and Barbados, Benin, Burkina Faso, Burma, Burundi. I could go on. There are, there are 36. But again, these are the countries that the administration has determined have not provided information necessary for vetting the people that have come from those countries. We have no background information on them. As a witness before the immigration subcommittee told us, they're being vetted against a blank sheet of paper, or worse than that, fraudulent information that they can easily obtain in these countries because of the corrupt nature of the government.
Let me ask you this. I don't know much about these countries in Africa, but their immigration and what's going on with all that. But Afghanistan is a place where most of the immigrants were people who helped us, worked at the embassy, worked as translators, and took a major effort to get them in this country, but they helped us. They were our friends, and they're subject to serious reprisals for having done that. They've been let in. And I understand they were totally vetted, and Afghanistan, I thought they weren't on this list, but they are, but the president said they were going to put them on a list of some sort because one guy from Afghanistan came and shot the poor National Guards person and killed her and wounded the other person. Right. That shouldn't punish everybody from Afghanistan.
Well, by the way, I agree with you, and I think the administration would agree with you, and you're quite right that many of the people brought over from Afghanistan, we did have records on because of their interactions with our forces. Unfortunately, this administration also, the Biden administration also allowed in many that were completely unvetted, and that's the fundamental problem. We're simply going back and reviewing these as carefully as possible. That's what the administration is doing by executive order. This simply codifies the process.
Would you be amenable to amending Afghanistan out because of the circumstances of their helping us, so many of them?
No, I would not. And the reason is, first, it's not my bill. And secondly, I support including Afghanistan in this list for the precise reasons that I just outlined. There were many admitted from Afghanistan for which there was no vetting. We have to go back and closely examine the backgrounds of those who were allowed into this country.
Thank you, sir.
Would the gentleman yield?
Would the gentleman yield?
Would the gentleman yield?
Ms. Lofgren was first, and Mr. Raskin.
I'll just say, I mean, I'm thinking about the Iranian Americans of Northern California, who are a group of patriots who are helping us fight the oppression within Iran. And, you know, I've met so many wonderful people who have married people born in Iran, but they lived in France. I mean, you're allocated based on your country of birth, not where you've lived. And this would direct a revision of the spouses of Americans who married somebody from Iran who came over from France. And I think it's unwarranted. You know, this is a group of people that I'm so respectful of in their advocacy for freedom and non-secular democratic society in Iran, and to target them, I think, is not something I want to do, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Thank you. Before I yield to Mr. Raskin, you know, I think this would include our colleague, Representative Omar, and there's no reason to go back and look at her and deport her, and this administration could do it. They are so vindictive. What they've done with the Fed chairman to investigate him for something is crazy. This is the weaponization of the entire government against folks. You know, and he says he likes the Danes. Enough to where you could do it the easy way or the hard way. Mr. Raskin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cohen. I wanted to echo Ms. Lofgren's point that there are lots of communities, including Iranian Americans, who are just being vilified and targeted for no reason here. The gentleman says that this is because there were people who were not vetted. Well, then focus on the people who've not been vetted from all over the world. If they actually suspended the vetting process and didn't follow the law, I wouldn't want those people getting in from anywhere, from any country in the world. That's what we should be focused on. We shouldn't be designating people simply by virtue of national origin. I yield back and thank you for yielding.
Mr. Chairman. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
I have a UC request.
The gentleman can state his request.
Yes, I'd like to submit for the record this article. Afghan visa fraud cases surface in Pakistan and U.S.
Without objection, be entered in the record. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is ready.
Mr. Chairman, I want to echo some of the points that my colleagues have made. At first glance, this bill seems to require USCIS to conduct a review of all approved immigration benefit requests for individuals from countries that are covered by any travel ban that Donald Trump puts in place to ensure that these cases were properly adjudicated. But I just think we should be honest about what the bill actually does. It singles out lawful immigrants from countries that have been targeted by this random discriminatory travel ban, and it places their legal status back under suspicion. These are individuals who did everything right. We talk in this committee all the time about people following the law. These are the people who applied for lawful immigration status. They submitted extensive documentation. They passed background checks, security screenings, interviews. They waited for many, many years for a decision. And now, after USCIS has reviewed their cases and approved them, this bill tells them that that approval is still not enough. It is an attack on our legal immigration system. And we know that because Donald Trump and the administration is currently doing exactly what this bill purports to do. Under the guise of, quote, national security and, quote, revetting, this administration has paused all immigration benefit requests for hundreds of thousands of people. And it's reviewing the approved cases of hundreds of thousands of others simply based on their country of origin. That includes people who were already approved for citizenship. And I am getting notifications of people around the country who went through what Mr. Raskin's constituent went through, where they have gone through an extensive process, been approved for citizenship, get to their citizenship ceremony, and are pulled out of the line. And I think I've spoken about this before. I believe I'm one of two naturalized citizens on this committee. I believe Mr. Garcia is as well. It took me 17 years to get my citizenship. I went through a lot, and I can advocate for myself, as you all will attest. And yet it was still extremely difficult, and there was a lot of processing. And I still remember that day when I got there to take my oath of citizenship. And, it was such an incredible honor, privilege, opportunity to be admitted after 17 years to be a United States citizen and to take that oath and to know I had gone through tests that most Americans would fail. If you gave that naturalization test to the majority of Americans, they would not pass it. I promise you that. But we studied, right? I studied those questions really hard because I really wanted to pass. And I wanted to be somebody who was worthy of the citizenship being conferred on me. And by the way, when you take that oath, there are very few countries in the world where you can have dual citizenship. There are some, but for most of us, certainly from India, it is not one of those countries. And so you have to renounce all allegiance to any other country when you take the oath. And we do that. We do that willingly because we know that when we come to the United States of America, it is an honor, it is a privilege, it is a process. And now, to be at the end of the finish line in that process, to literally have the relief of knowing that you can never be torn from the country that you've built your life in, or that you've raised your kids in, or that you've conducted your employment in, to have a second-class set of citizens is such an insult, and I actually think it's going to backfire on us because you will have a whole bunch of people starting to question, why would I renounce my citizenship to my allegiance to any other country? If somebody can come in and just say all of a sudden, and by the way, the Trump administration is doing this as well, they are actively asking for a certain number of citizenship applications to be revoked every month. There's like a target that they've given to USCIS folks to go back and look at US citizens who have been naturalized and go back through their applications. And I think that is just so dangerous for all of us. And I think it's also, this bill is a huge waste of agency time and resources. I had a lot of other things to say, but I see that my time has expired. It's a very emotional moment for many of us who are US citizens who have been naturalized, who have lived in this country for a long time, to see the distinctions that are being made between those of us who are naturalized and have been so incredibly patriotic, whether you like our opinions or not, and a part of this country, to see the ways in which, certain elements of the Constitution don't seem to apply. Certain aspects of our citizenship that we are so proud of don't seem to apply. So I would just ask that we recognize what this bill is doing and oppose it. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady speaks and the building rumbles. Mr. Raskin, seek recognition? Or?
I seek recognition, and I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature
Without
of...
objection, the amendment be considered as read. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized to explain the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I've got a very compelling and very germane amendment. It's one sentence. It says, this section shall not take effect until the date on which Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testifies before the Committee on the Judiciary of the U.S. House of Representatives. We know it is germane because the bill itself has a provision saying that the director of USCIS must provide an in-person briefing to the Judiciary Committee of the House and of the Senate. And so this could not be more closely paired with that. If the USCIS director's got to come in to testify, also his boss should have to come in and testify as well, Secretary Noem. And we need this to happen, Mr. Chairman. I don't need to detain people for that long to prove that Secretary Noem has shown complete disregard for congressional oversight over the last year. She has yet to come before this committee. She left a Homeland Oversight House hearing after 2 hours because she claimed she needed to go to a FEMA Review Council meeting, which had been canceled and still hasn't been rescheduled. The responsiveness of DHS to our oversight requests has been abysmal. When we do get responses, which is rare, they are full of lies and half-truths. Just one example, I've sent her multiple letters with Ranking Member Jayapal inquiring about the number of U.S. citizens that ICE has detained across the country. And I got interested in this because one of my constituents was detained for 5 days by ICE. We didn't get her released until Christmas Day. A U.S. citizen was detained. That's what woke me up to this issue. It turned out Ms. Jayapal has been on this for a while, so we wrote a letter inquiring how many U.S. citizens are being detained by ICE. There's a now rogue police agency which is going after U.S. citizens as well as legal residents and undocumented people. Well, we get an answer which says simply, we do not detain U.S. citizens, which we know is false. I can tell you from my own district, that's false. I have constituents who are U.S. citizens who've been held by ICE. We need Secretary Noem to come in to testify before the United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee. She needs to be held accountable. Remember, Article 1 branch, Congress, we are the lawmaking branch of government. We've got the power over naturalization and immigration. That's us. The role of the president is simply to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. They execute the laws which we pass. The oversight function is integral to our ability to pass the laws that the American people need, and then to continually review and update those laws to make sure that we are paying proper attention to changes in circumstances. So, it should be noted, my staff gave me an article demonstrating that Secretary Noem's disdain for congressional oversight is not limited to our side of the aisle alone. There's an article in Notice which said that Republican staff and members are complaining that to get Secretary Noem or her staff on the phone is impossible. The article noted that GOP lawmakers are frustrated with Noem's consistent lack of communication and new rules that are delaying critical FEMA funds. One Republican member who went on record but wished to remain anonymous stated, "You would think a former member of Congress would have more effing respect for the institution she used to serve in." So I hope this is something we can do on a bipartisan basis today. There are a number of things I'm hoping we can do on a bipartisan basis. We need the Secretary of Homeland Security to come in and testify. This is perfectly relevant and germane because we're asking the USCIS director to come in and testify, and I tender it to your judgment, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can support me on that. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Just for the committee, we are working to get Ms. Secretary Noem in front of the committee. I think we announced last hearing that we have the Attorney General coming on February 11th, and we are working to get Secretary Noem in front of the committee as soon as possible as well. So we will work on that. The gentleman withdraws his point of order against the amendment. The question occurs on the. Someone want to speak on the amendment? Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I just want to lend my voice to the concerns that the ranking member has. Why is it that ICE is detaining Americans? And we have a number of articles that I introduced into the record last week about this issue. We have journalists who have documented over 170 Americans who have been detained by ICE, and yet we continually are gaslit by this administration, lied to by Secretary Noem, saying to us point blank that Americans have not been detained, when we know that it is patently false, because we have the records, we have the receipts, we have the names. And I want to remind everybody that immigration and customs enforcement is about immigration. They should patently not be arresting and detaining Americans, full stop. And Americans across this country are waking up to the fact that more and more we see rogue movements from ICE agents. I am thinking of a very disturbing incident that happened in the Minneapolis area in the last 48 hours, where a 17-year-old American citizen was snatched up while he was at a Target, working at a Target, 17-year-old American citizen, hauled off. He's crying. He's saying to the officers, "I'm an American citizen. I can prove it." They haul him off. And then, perhaps at some point, they realize that they've made a mistake. They literally dump him on the ground. Not where he was working, but down the road in front of a Walmart. And you can all look at this. It's all over the internet. And they literally slam him to the ground in front of a Walmart, not even where he was taken up, and they drive away. A 17-year-old American citizen. And I was just talking to my colleague, Ms. Ross. She said they had a similar incident in her home county. ICE is arresting and detaining Americans, and our government is lying about it. And we have the responsibility as members of this committee to demand answers from our government. It is our right and our duty to stand up for our constituents. And it is deeply disturbing to me that we have now incidents of Americans' doors being ramrodded without any warrant. This should terrify all of us. This is chilling. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. And in fact, Americans, as I said, are waking up because in that YouGov poll that I just talked about, in terms of how people are feeling about ICE, 14% of Republicans said that they thought that Agent Ross should be arrested. 14% of Republicans. People are waking up to the fact that this ICE, I don't even know what to call them at this point.
Well, would the gentlelady yield?
I will yield.
You know, somebody else who would be very upset about this situation is Thomas Jefferson. If you read the Declaration of Independence, a lot of the specific items in his Bill of Wrongs against King George sound like they could have been written about this administration and ICE, right? So the king has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He's kept amongst us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures, quartered large bodies of armed troops amongst us. He's obstructed the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and so on. I mean, this is extraordinary what's taking place with a rogue agency attacking the rights of U.S. citizens.
That's right. And I would say, again, we need answers, and this committee, regardless of party, should be demanding answers from our government as to why ICE is detaining Americans. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
It's an unfortunate truth that one of the reasons, or a big reason for Americans being accosted, stopped, and jailed by ICE is the fact that they are generally dark-skinned people or people of color. And this legislation, by the way, sets up or continues what the Supreme Court has put into place, a second-class citizenship tier, a caste system where people who are not from European nations are not affected by this act, but people from non-European nations are affected by this legislation. People who are Caucasian are not affected. Caucasian immigrants are not affected by this legislation, but non-Caucasian immigrants are. It's a second-class system that's being set up, but the Supreme Court has given license to it in its decision, which allows for ICE to stop Hispanic-looking people and other people who look like immigrants. You can stop them just because of how you think they look. And it's called a Kavanaugh stop. Because Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the decision. So we have people across the nation being stopped in accordance with Kavanaugh stops, and it's all legal. And so you've got non-white looking Americans who are subject to having no Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure. And you have Caucasian citizens not affected by that adverse ruling. And so we're setting up a second-class system here in this country. This second-class system has always been there. It's just being reinforced with the advent of the Trump administration and people like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon calling the shots. And Elon Musk also. Let's not forget about the Heil Hitler saluting Doge guy who cut jobs mostly affecting black women in this country, or disproportionately impacting black women in this country. But this is a racial profiling bill that I oppose. I support the amendment, ironically. And with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
I just want to describe some of the people that they're referring to as being so-called targeted by ICE. During Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota, ICE has arrested more than 400 illegal aliens, including pedophiles, rapists, and violent thugs. These vicious criminal illegal aliens were allowed to roam Minnesota streets thanks to its sanctuary policies. Here, a 47-year-old criminal illegal alien from Burma who has been convicted of third-degree criminal sexual conduct using force or coercion has had a final order of removal since February 27, 2014. A 59-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who was convicted of 2 counts of rape in Ohio. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He has had a final order of removal since December 17, 2009. A 52-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who has been convicted of 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct using force or coercion. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, and he has had a final order of removal since March 2004. What I refer to when I say a final order of removal, it means all of them have already had the due process that they're entitled to be removed from our country. These are all illegal aliens who were in Minnesota committing these crimes. I'm shocked that my colleagues on the other side don't care about that. A 43-year-old criminal illegal alien from Somalia convicted of robbery, a final order of removal since May 17, 2011. A 42-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who was convicted of first-degree criminal sexual conduct with a child under 13 years old. He has had a final order of removal since October 31st, 2006. Again, all of these folks have had all of the due process that they are entitled to be moved out of our country. A 50-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who was convicted of first-degree great bodily harm and sentenced to 14 years and 7 months, third-degree sexual conduct, sexual intercourse with a child, and sentenced to 210 days in California. What does that say for California? And has had a final order of removal since October 31, 2000. 49-year-old criminal alien from Mexico who has been arrested for soliciting children through electronic communication to engage in sexual conduct and convicted of hiring or agreeing to hire a child under 16 for prostitution. A 63-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who was convicted of third-degree criminal sexual conduct and second-degree assault with a dangerous weapon has had a final order of removal since May 23, 2001. A 26-year-old criminal illegal alien from Ecuador who was convicted of robbery in Ohio, driving while intoxicated, assaulting a police officer, obstructing the legal process, and disarming a police officer. A 51-year-old criminal alien from Mexico who was convicted of third-degree assault with intent to cause physical injury. He has had a final order of removal since February 3rd, 2010. These are not people that I want to defend. These are people that we need to have out of our country.
Well,
They do not belong here, and it is necessary for them to be removed. These are just some of the folks that have been arrested in this operation in Minnesota because the Democrats, the governor, and the mayor of Minneapolis have refused to protect the citizens of Minnesota against these kinds of people. These truly are the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. And if the leadership in Minnesota and these other sanctuary states actually cooperated with the Trump administration, you would not see the kinds of activities that they have been having to undertake in order to protect the citizens of the United States of America. I again cannot believe that we are debating whether these people should be removed from our country. This is not a race issue. It is not a racial issue. I don't care what color you are. If you are committing rape on a child, you should be removed, whether you are from Norway or Germany or Mexico or Honduras. It doesn't matter to me what you look like. What matters to me is your conduct. And if you are going to engage in illegal conduct in the United States of America as an illegal alien, we are going to find you. This administration is going to find you, and we are going to remove you. We are no longer going to allow our citizens to be placed at risk because there are communities like you see in Minnesota and Colorado and other sanctuary states that allow this kind of mayhem to happen. With that, I yield back.
Generally yields back. The chair now recognizes I think, has the gentlelady spoken on this one, or?
No.
Then you're recognized.
I know, I've spoken on a number of these, but I have not spoken on this one yet. So I rise in support of the ranking member's amendment to have Kristi Noem here before us. And it seems pretty simple to me. I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask her. By the way, Kristi Noem said something the other day that I agree with. She was on CNN, and she said, "We can't trust our government anymore." And the CNN interviewer, Dana Bash, said to her, "You are the government." And Kristi Noem said, "Yes, that's what I'm saying." On this particular point, I agree with her, because they are telling lies to us every single day. And we can't trust the government when it's represented by people like Kristi Noem. So we should have her come. She hasn't responded to any of the letters that we've sent. That's not a surprise. But I think it is important that she come and testify before us. I also wanted to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article that literally just came out in the New York Times. It's called "3 Prosecutors Quit After Push to Investigate ICE Shooting Victim's Widow."
Without objection.
And I'm going to read from this article because I think this is very important. Remember, the leading federal prosecutor on the fraud case in Minnesota was appointed by Donald Trump. He is a career prosecutor, and he was appointed acting U.S. attorney by Trump in May of 2024. And he has now resigned. 3 Minnesota federal, I'm reading from the article, 3 Minnesota federal prosecutors resigned over the Justice Department's push to investigate the widow of a woman killed by an ICE agent and its reluctance to investigate the shooter, according to people with knowledge of the decision. And the article goes on to say Mr. Thompson's resignation came after senior Justice Department officials pressed for a criminal investigation into the actions of the widow of Renee Nicole Good, the Minneapolis woman killed by an ICE agent last Wednesday. Mr. Thompson, 47, a career prosecutor, objected to that approach, as well as to the Justice Department's refusal to include state officials in investigating whether the shooting itself was lawful. 2 other senior career prosecutors, Harry Jacobs and Melinda Williams, also resigned on Tuesday. Mr. Jacobs had been Mr. Thompson's deputy overseeing the fraud investigation, which began in 2022. And then it goes on to say that these fraud cases, I'll read exactly what the article says, the fraud cases were the chief reason the Trump administration launched an immigration crackdown in the state. This goes back to the amendment that was ruled out of order in the last bill, which really, I think, should have been ruled in order. It went straight to the question of this so-called fraud investigation and how it's being linked to the surge in immigration enforcement by ICE and Border Patrol. And I think it is very important for us to recognize that what is happening with the Department of Justice and with the Department of Homeland Security is even pushing out senior prosecutors. I mean, this prosecutor, this federal prosecutor, Mr. Thompson, was the one who was overseeing this sprawling fraud investigation. And he cannot abide by how the so-called fraud investigation is being used to justify things that he cannot justify as a federal prosecutor appointed by Donald Trump to that position. And so I know we have very capable prosecutors, including Mr. Knott on the other side, former prosecutors. And I would just say, please look at what is happening. Because when you not only have an ICE agent who shoots a woman 3 times, we all have video that's very, very clear, but let's say, let's stipulate to the fact that we all believe there should be an independent investigation of what happened. And you have the Justice Department not only saying they're not going to prosecute that ICE official, they're not going to conduct an investigation, they're not going to share the results of whatever they're doing with the state law enforcement investigations, but then you also have them trying to essentially criminalize and assassinate the widow of the woman who was shot, and you have these senior prosecutors on the Republican side resigning because of that conduct, I hope that people who have been prosecutors on the other side will look at this and start to speak out. It's extremely dangerous. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized. Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I wanted to say that I actually agree with one thing on the other side, and I think it's going to happen. Kristi Noem should come, and we should hear from her, and I believe that she will. There's nothing to indicate that she won't. You know, I've sat here for years now, as I guess a good number of us have, and I am always perplexed, honestly, by the other side. Always concerned with the criminal, never the victim. Always concerned with the individuals who have been convicted or indicted in another country or in this country, but never the people who've been the recipients of the pain. Always concerned with the perpetrator of criminal activity on the other side, but not the unfortunate recipient of the activity. Always concerned with the drug dealer and not the family whose family has been affected so much when somebody is addicted and poisoned and their life is ruined. Concerned with the murderer, but not the loss of life. Concerned with the rapist, they are, but not the child or the woman who has been defiled. I would even get it if you repeatedly brought up both the one side of this, all the horrible, god-awful things that have been done, and I wish to associate myself with the remarks that Ms. Hageman made, but they don't talk about even the other side at all. They don't matter. They don't care. All the horrible things that happened, they just don't say a word. The silence is deafening when it comes to that.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Gentlelady, consider point of order.
Do we not have a rule here in the Judiciary Committee about, impugning members of this committee, using words like never and always?
I've never.
You just said that we always stand up for the rapist.
The gentlelady has not stated a point of order. The gentleman, the time belongs to the gentleman from New Jersey. The gentleman is recognized.
So we're back to what I said. If you were concerned with both even and said, well, we have to make sure that we have the rule of law and that those who've committed crimes are treated fairly, I'm open to that. I understand that. I'll listen to that. But I just don't hear the other point. And if we want to listen to the tapes and look at the videos, it's all the one. I don't get it. We don't talk about those who were hurt and their lives destroyed. So I would say that if we want to have this conversation, I sincerely would recommend that maybe we think about those folks a little bit. We've had them here. We've listened to them here. They've testified here. People who've lost their husbands, their wives, their daughters, their sons, people who've been raped, who've been beaten, children. We didn't have them testify. We just heard stories about them. For God's sake, there's a reasoning this is all happening. There's a reason that the changes have occurred, because people don't want this happening to them. They have a right as Americans not to fear this. So, of course, we're going to do something about it. And in the process, if something happened that the other side feels was inappropriate or illegal, yeah, we can discuss that. But for God's sake, to hear only the one point of view, to me, and I really mean this, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand it. It is weird and perverse and bizarre. I don't get it. Because there's millions of Americans. Yes, you may point out there's some Americans that were going too far. Okay, I'll listen to that. I'll digest that. But man, there's a lot of Americans that were really scared, really worried, really upset, and feared for their families at so many levels. It's hard to live life today with all the challenges there are out there, especially for young people and the defenseless. And the silence is deafening. So I just wanted to leave that thought here. Maybe we think about the people who've been so badly hurt by some of the awful, horrible, and if you want the lists of people who have been deported or have been imprisoned and what they did and who they hurt and how many lives they destroyed, that's certainly producible.
Will the gentleman
can get you
yield?
that. we
Will
can
the
get you
gentleman
there.
yield?
I will yield for the 48 seconds I have.
Thank you. When will the gentleman support putting up the plaque in commemoration of the sacrifice of the Capitol Hill police officers who defended us on January 6th? When will the gentleman support bringing that plaque out?
Reclaim my time. First of all, I don't know that that's germane to what we're doing
Well,
today.
it's supporting
but
the police.
I will answer it anyhow. Guess what? I do support it. I wouldn't have a problem with the plaque going up. It is a decision by the Speaker, and this is what he's decided, and I support the Speaker, but I don't have a problem with putting the plaque up. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to speak just a little bit, and then I'm going to yield to my ranking member. But when my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were talking about all the pedophiles and the violent thugs and the rapists, it does sound exactly like some of the January 6ers who were pardoned by this president. Because, in fact, some of those very exact folks went out and committed these additional crimes after they were pardoned. Soliciting from minors, abusing little children, raping women, assaulting officers, in fact, even after they were pardoned. I don't think anyone on my side of the aisle wants to get into a debate about the rule of law. We all believe in upholding the rule of law. And I have to tell you, people of all ages, of all ethnic descriptions, of all status, commit crimes every day. And the Cato Institute actually has a report that talks about the tens of thousands of folks who are here illegally who are committing crimes and are incarcerated versus the tens of millions of U.S. citizens, native-born Americans, who are committing crimes and are incarcerated. So it's not the undocumented folks who are taking up all the space in the prisons, it's U.S. citizens. But I support this amendment because Kristi Noem should show up. She should show up with all of her receipts. Because if she's unafraid of showing up, she should have all of her receipts. Because we have questions. You should have questions. Why are ICE agents busting down doors without proper warrants, without probable cause? Why are they rolling up on schools with like little kids, okay, during lunchtime, rolling up into hospitals, into social service centers, and into child care centers, looking for whom? And who are they? Why are they still masked? No other law enforcement agency has masked individuals working for them. Why do they need $500 extra billion? Like, what else are they going to do with this money? That's why we have questions, because when they're rolling up into your city, they are also impacting local law enforcement. Their violent tactics are impacting local law enforcement on top of injuring citizens and locals with tear gas and weapons. And these folks are infringing upon your Fourth Amendment rights, your Fifth Amendment rights, the 10th Amendment rights. They have thrown the Constitution into the fireplace. And this is the exact committee where we should be asking her these questions. And if she thinks it's okay to do it, she can come with her receipts. So I would like to yield the rest of my time to the ranking member if he would like it.
I thank the gentlelady very much. I was truly astonished by the remarks of the gentleman from New Jersey, who said that he is always shocked that the Democrats stand up for criminals, for the convicts, for the drug dealers, for the rapists, and not for the victims. He finds it weird, he finds it perverse, he finds it bizarre, which strikes me as a case of nothing less than moral dyslexia. And I would charge him with exactly what he's charging us with. Let's begin with January 6th. I know the gentleman doesn't like to talk about January 6th, but charity and compassion for victims starts at home, Mr. Van Drew. Just like the defense of the rule of law starts at home, right here. So we had thousands of crimes committed against our police officers. And Donald Trump pardoned 1,600 of them, people who smashed police officers in the face with baseball bats, with hockey sticks, with Confederate battle flags, with Donald Trump flags, Confederate battle flags. The gentleman doesn't utter a word about that. He's content to have them give $5 million to the family of Ashley Babbitt, even though 2 different government investigations said the police had acted responsibly and reasonably under the circumstances, but he's got no problem with giving $5 million to them. Has he proposed a penny for the families of the officers, including the ones who've been driven out of police work because they're permanently disabled and disfigured by what that riotous mob did? This goes way beyond January 6th. I'm going to submit for the record a list of all the clemency grants by President Donald Trump. Here are the drug dealers you're looking for. Here are the murderers you're looking for. Here are the rapists you're looking for. Look at the people who got pardoned. I'm going to submit our report 1 year later assessing the public safety implications of President Trump's mass pardon of 1,600 rioters. It's not just the people who committed violence on that day.
Without objection.
33 pardoned insurrectionists have since been charged with, convicted of, or arrested for these offenses. I'll leave you with this thought, Mr. Van Drew, so you can take this back and consider your double standards.
Gentleman's time
Rape,
has expired.
child sexual assault.
Time has expired.
Okay, well, maybe somebody else will give me the chance to complete it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
excuse me. Gentleman from Texas, then I'll come to the gentleman from Arizona. I apologize. Gentleman from Texas is in line.
Well, my apologies to the gentleman from Arizona. What we're talking about here is an amendment to a bill, the purpose of which is to preserve the Integrity and Immigration Benefits Act.
Yep.
The bill is to require USCIS to review all approved immigration benefit requests that were approved from January 20th, 21 to present, to make sure that foreign individuals who enter the United States from terror-prone or high-risk countries, make sure our national security is being protected as a top priority. We can debate the policies of how we handle American citizens and how long they should be in jail and what they should be in jail for. I'm for that. I'm for prosecuting bad guys. I'm for putting them in jail. And I've had debates here about policies taken here on both sides of the aisle under the second chance, first step, all these things. I am decidedly for making sure that bad guys who are carrying out particularly violent crimes, but crimes in general, are put behind bars and are not released prematurely so that they engage in additional criminal behavior and recidivism. The point here is that the individuals we're talking about that ICE is removing from the United States are individuals who are here in the United States because somebody decided they should be here. And these are people who are illegally present or present by virtue of what I believe was an abuse of the law under asylum and parole under the previous administration to put individuals into our country that needn't be here. That's the point. So when we're talking about going down the list of people that ICE have arrested, the gentlelady from Wyoming has done it. Other members has done it. I could go through the list I've got right in front of me. Austin, Texas, kidnapping and rape, an individual from Afghanistan. Somebody from Mexico, aggravated assault on a family and house member, impeding breath and circulation. An individual from Honduras, aggravated assault causing significant bodily injury. These are all in Texas, right around where I live. Indecent assault, guy from Mexico in Harris County in Houston. Sexual assault of a child, a guy in Harris County, which is Houston. Abandoning or endangering a child, Burnett, Texas, right up the road from where I live. Indecency with a child by exposure, Fort Bend County, Texas, near Houston. Aggravated assault, assault and drug possession. To the extent we care about race, which I do not, I just searched the database for people from Ukraine, making maybe a wild assumption some of them might be just some white dudes. Sure enough, I got a whole page of incredibly bad crimes here in terms of child abuse, burglary, drugs, assault, sexual exploitation of a minor. These are very bad people who are walking among us in the streets of the United States. And the question is why? President Trump didn't release these people into the streets of America. I didn't vote to release these people onto the streets of America. It wasn't the people that are running this administration that have released these people onto the streets of America. It was very decidedly the Biden administration, Mayorkas, and others that released the people into the streets of America and/or have supported policies that have allowed these dangerous individuals to exploit our immigration laws to be on the streets of the United States. And ICE is engaging in their job to remove them. In what universe do we not say we fully support ICE removing them? Have hearings about conduct, review conduct, as we should in oversight. But the idea that we're talking about 33 individuals, as the ranking member raised, about those individuals, all but 4 of them were for events that occurred prior to January 6th. So only 4 were things that have occurred since. Now, do I support ensuring that if they're violating the law for whatever charges the gentleman read off, due process, et cetera? Yes, charge them with crimes, put them in jail. The point here is we have thousands, tens of thousands of people from around the world who are either illegally present or are only present by virtue of the abuse of our immigration laws, very specifically by the previous administration, that are on our streets endangering Americans, and Americans have died as a result, been raped as a result, and harmed as a result, and ICE should remove them. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. It's the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can all stipulate that all of us are opposed to crime and to victimizing innocent people. But I do think it's ironic that the President of the United States has pardoned people who have been involved in those same things. And I think the gentlelady from California had a quick question she wanted to pose. I yield to her for that question.
Yes, thank you. Listening to my colleagues talk about Americans who were victimized, it made me think about the family of Officer Sitnick, who was here for January 6th. And I just was wondering, because I know the ranking member was talking about this list of folks that were pardoned, these January 6ers, and I wanted to know if Republicans had met with the family of the slain officer, if Republicans had listened, had consoled, all of the things that we're being accused of not doing. That was my question.
Yeah, reclaiming my time, I would like to yield.
Objection, the bill be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Knott, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my privilege to introduce for consideration H.R. 2853, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. Briefly, Mr. Chairman, organized retail crimes, or ORC, directly cost the United States nearly $130 billion annually, and this is direct costs. The indirect are obviously much higher. These crimes target everything from bars of soap to entire vans, trucks, train cars, shipping containers, and beyond for illegal theft and resale around the world. What may look like an isolated criminal act is far too often one spoke in a very well-oiled wheel. These criminals are members of larger networks, many of which include the more well-known criminal activities such as drug trafficking, gang crime, violent crime, and of course, fraud. Typically, once the underlying theft has occurred, the stolen goods invariably are disassembled or distributed into the broader black market, often crossing state lines and even leaving the country. Again, whether we are referring to skill saws or automobiles, everything that is for sale, transported, or imported into the United States is in play for this set of crimes. The effects of these crimes are as far-reaching as they are deep, whether North Carolina, California, Montana, Arizona, New York, or any other state, organized retail crime has and will continue to affect all citizens. We have all seen everyday products in some parts of the country locked up behind shelves at neighborhood stores. Major retailers and small businesses alike are closing their doors in high crime areas because the cost of this type of crime is simply too steep. We've seen instances of mobs storming in an organized fashion into storefronts and raiding their merchandise. On the wholesale level, entire shipping containers are often seized before the perpetrators are even aware what the items are that they have stolen. Lesser known but just as concerning are instances of semi-truck drivers being attacked while they are delivering shipments. Or, in an instance close to home, a Home Depot employee who was in North Carolina was murdered over something as simple as 3 pressure washers. These crimes, of course, affect the cost of goods, public safety, employee safety, facility safety, and even national security. This legislation provides a needed federal framework that is currently absent for a set of crimes that have become inherently a national problem. Of course, localized theft, shoplifting, and property crime should remain at the local level. However, if a broader interstate or international component is realized upon investigation, law enforcement needs the necessary tools to investigate, dismantle, prosecute, and remove the involved criminal parties. To date, those tools do not exist, and this bill is a profound step forward towards meeting that need. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Mr. Raskin for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very pleased to support this bipartisan legislation and to salute my colleague, Mr. Knott from North Carolina, for his leadership and his stewardship of the legislation. H.R. 2853, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, will bridge a significant enforcement gap. Organized retail theft schemes are often too complex for state prosecutors to undertake and bring down themselves, and yet too modest often for federal prosecutors to engage and pursue. In recent years, retailers have sounded the alarm about this crisis, expressing urgent concern that organized retail crime has become a significant threat both to public safety and to the retail economy, threatening the viability of businesses like cargo brokers, shippers, big box stores, and online marketplaces, as well as the basic physical safety of the people who work at these businesses. Although there's no clear definition of organized retail crime, we know what the basic problem is. Criminal enterprises which operate in a coordinated manner to commit large-scale theft of merchandise for resale or to defraud retailers and convert the proceeds into cash or crypto. It has become increasingly clear that these kinds of operations are coordinated, enabled by the most up-to-date technology and communication tools, and very hard to stop. As we learned during the Crime Subcommittee's hearing last year, we are describing a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that grows, evolves, and adapts almost daily to the latest technological trends, security improvements, and modified business practices. And while state and local law enforcement are our first line of defense against organized retail crime, they've got limited resources and cannot always investigate crimes which cross state lines and even international borders. H.R. 2853 is necessary to address sophisticated operations that range from large-scale physical theft of shipping containers to complex computer hacking schemes that trick dispatchers into diverting whole truckloads full of goods away from their purchasers. Other forms of organized retail crime directly target consumers, such as those involving the purchase of gift cards. These schemes can also bear the hallmarks of organized crime, with advanced planning, division of labor, and the use of sophisticated means to steal people's money in new and diabolically crafty ways. Organized retail crime is centralized, organized, and sophisticated. Combating it calls for a coordinated law enforcement response. With the bill's creation of the Organized Retail and Supply Chain Crime Coordination Center, we will no longer be flying blind. The center will be tasked with collecting the data we need to understand the scope of the problem and to formulate more targeted solutions as data is gathered and shared across agencies, retailers, and supply chains. By leveraging the strengths of local, state, and federal law enforcement, the center will foster the development of a coordinated response to address large-scale organized retail crime that crosses state lines and global borders. The question's been raised about where we place the center and whether it's more appropriate to place it under DOJ rather than Homeland Security. While I'm voting for the bill today because it addresses this serious problem, we should take a hard look at why the bill is not being placed at DOJ before it goes to the floor. But I hope we can work together both to make Corca even stronger and to pass other laws to address issues with the asset forfeiture law, which I know the chairman is also concerned about. In particular, I want to work together to move a bill I co-sponsor with my friend from Wisconsin, Representative Wahlberg, the Fifth Amendment Integrity Restoration Act. At base, it would reform civil asset forfeiture laws to raise the level of proof necessary for the government to seize property, protect small business owners, and increase transparency through the whole process. The committee reported the FAIR Act to the floor unanimously last Congress, and I hope we can do it again. On balance, this legislation bridges an important and significant enforcement gap that's made it very hard to dismantle organized retail crime syndicates. A new fusion center will be a significant step in moving us in the right direction. I support 2853 and yield back.
Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute.
Mr. Chairman, before you do, I forgot to enter into the record a statement in support of the bill from Representative Lofgren, who was unable to be here.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment at the desk, and this amendment removes the language concerning the facilities.
Hang on a second. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purpose of amendment. Chair now recognizes the gentleman to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment removes language concerning the facilities of interstate and foreign commerce in statutes related to the transportation of stolen goods and the sale or receipt of the stolen goods. This amendment upholds the principles of federalism without changing the important underlying substance of the bill. And before I yield back, I too, like Mr. Raskin, have a letter for the record from retailers and truckers I'd like to submit. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to associate myself with the comments of both Mr. Knott and Mr. Raskin. I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. I've worked with Representative Joyce on it. I want to thank Representative Joyce for working on this bill over more than one session. This is a very important thing because if we can't get to the root of coordination that's crossing state lines, then it just looks like we're having small retail crime situations that really are a part of a bigger, broader concern. So this is an important bill. I think we should move it. Hope it gets to the floor and through the Senate. Yep. Thanks so much, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also like to...
Wait, hang on. I got another Californian, then I'm going to come to you.
I'd be happy to yield to my friend from Southern California.
Kylie, that's news to me. Go ahead.
You're for it, right? So this is a bipartisan bill, and maybe maybe my friend from across the aisle, but from my state, will to some extent echo my comments as to the experience we've had in California, which was one of a number of states that decided to conduct an experiment with decriminalized stealing. And shockingly, what you got was a lot more stealing. In California, for some time, you have scenes where people just walk into department stores, load up their cart with apparel totaling less than $950, and then don't even try to hide that they're walking out without paying. It was just par for the course. And we've had this culminate in these incredible smash and grabs where hammer-wielding thieves go in and just wreak havoc on jewelry stores and other places. So thankfully, things are changing in California because the people of our state passed an initiative to make crime illegal again. And you actually have dash cam footage now where thieves are riding in a police car and don't understand what's going on, why they're being arrested for something that used to carry no consequences in our state. And then they're informed that there's a new law and they're very upset about this. So we've seen that, having consequences associated with retail theft actually makes a difference. So I supported this bill even before we had Prop 36 in California because I wanted to use whatever jurisdiction we have under federal law to compensate for the shortcomings in our state. But it's also true that there are some forms of theft where there is direct federal jurisdiction, and we need to have appropriate penalties under federal law. So this bill does a few very important things. It increases the threshold and allows for the aggregation of the value of stolen property throughout 12-month period at a level of $5,000 for charging purposes. It also expands the definition of monetary instrument to include things like gift cards that are increasingly used by organized retail crime rings, and it also sets up a center to combat organized retail and supply chain crime. This will go a long way towards assisting every state in the country, towards assisting those citizens that live in states that don't have appropriate criminal penalties, as well as cracking down on things like cargo theft, which has become a $7 billion problem for the trucking industry alone. So I'm glad to see the bipartisan support for this, including from my colleague from California, and hope that it gets a vote on the floor very soon. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The other gentleman from California is recognized.
I think I'd just like to add to Mr. Kiley's comments that smash and grab, this is not just about Home Depot. It's also about the small mom and pop supermarket in the corner that would have people walking in, grabbing products and not paying for them out the door over and over again. We did pass Prop 68. 68% of the voters of California passed Prop 68. In my hometown of Santa Ana, 71% of the voters approved Prop 36, which essentially makes a lot of these crimes a felony now. So I also stand in support of this measure because this is a big issue. It's a serious issue. Let's make sure that people on Main Street can survive without being victimized over and over again. Thank you, Mr. Kiley, and I, again, support this measure. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you so much. I also support this piece of legislation. I thank the bill's sponsor for working with me and several others on we think, making better language for the bill, and we look forward to the bill's positive impacts. So just give you some idea. Of course, we talk about interstate movement of these stolen goods, but if you live in a border state like this hotbed of Californians that we have on this committee, and myself as well, you know that we see this moving across the southern side of our border as well, and so this is going to be important to deal with these issues. Just a few years ago, CVS reported that in 2 minutes, the average professional thief targeting CVS steals $2,000 worth of goods in a 2-minute period. Target was growing by 50% a year, from $400 million to $600 million in missing inventory through theft and shrinkage, and that was directly impairing their profitability. National Retail Federation said they saw a 26% increase a few years ago in these types of thefts. And we also see Mexican drug cartels behind the surge in retail theft. They're organized and they bring the theft back across the border. And then earlier this year in Arizona, 2 men stole over $140,000 in merchandise from different Walmart stores across several Arizona counties. It's a rampant problem. It's multi-billions of dollars. And now the testimony that we had in our hearing, on the subcommittee hearing on this just recently, the truckers talked about how the softwares for their logistics are being hacked, and sometimes trucks are being directed to phony drop sites where they drop a container load of material, of goods and inventory, and then they leave, not even realizing that they had delivered to the wrong location because the destination had been hacked into their software for their truck. So this is a timely bill. I'm glad we're doing it, and I support the bill and will yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to share my support for H.R. 2853, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, which I am a proud co-sponsor of. I thank my good friend from Ohio, Congressman Joyce, for his leadership in championing this meaningful legislation, as well as Chairman Jordan for including it in today's markup, and my colleague, Congressman Knott, for his advocacy here today. While much of the country has watched organized mobs storm stores and crime rings boldly target major retailers due to soft on crime policies, Florida chose a different path to not only address these crimes, but to deter them. Last year, Florida increased penalties for organized retail theft and made certain repeat offenders eligible for up to 30 years in prison. It's time to bring Florida's approach to the federal government so that we can protect consumers, keep prices low for hardworking Americans, and stop organized retail crime, especially as some states inadequately enforce the law. According to the National Retail Federation, retail larceny incidents increased by 93% from 2019 to 2023, including a nearly 90% increase in actual dollar losses. Retail stores in 2023 lost over $121 billion to retail theft, which is a stark contrast to the numbers from as recently as 2017. Organized retail theft causes massive financial losses to businesses each year, and those costs are ultimately passed on to the American consumer through higher prices. By enhancing law enforcement coordination and strengthening prosecutorial authority, Florida is prioritizing safe communities where businesses and families can thrive. The Combating Organized Retail Crime Act would establish an organized retail and supply chain crime coordination center within Homeland Security investigations at the Department of Homeland Security. This coordination center would increase collaboration between federal, state, and local law enforcement, along with retail crime associations, to help disrupt these criminal operations. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this good bill. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I associate my comments with my colleague from Florida. Organized retail crime has become increasingly sophisticated, involving multi-state criminal networks that target retail stores, warehouses, supply chains. And right now, these criminal organizations coordinate across jurisdictions. They move stolen goods through complex logistics networks. They sell them online. They've been faster than law enforcement agencies, and they've been able to share information. And it's happening in communities like mine in South Florida, although our state has been very tough on how to deal with it. This bill would strengthen collaboration among federal, state, and local law enforcement and establish a centralized coordination center within the Department of Homeland Security. Let's be clear what this bill does and does not do. This legislation is not about everyday shoplifting. We're talking about networks that steal at scale, sometimes entire truckloads of goods, and resell them through sophisticated channels before law enforcement agencies even realize they're connected. The bill focuses federal resources where they belong in organized, large-scale criminal activity. Organized retail crime is not victimless. When the theft rings coordinate across state lines and supply chains, it drives up prices for families at the register, and it puts retail and delivery workers in harm. Improving coordination to help protect employees, consumers, and supply chains and make law enforcement more effective. It's why 2853 resolution has strong bipartisan support, reflecting the broad recognition of the problem, the need for meaningful action. And let me just say to the public who goes to the store now in many areas around the country and can't get deodorant or toothpaste or mouthwash without having to push a button and wait for an attendant to come. These things are locked up behind glass. They're locked up behind plastic. It is some of the most frustrating shopping experiences. And what happens is it hurts retail, because you know what happens? Those people decide to buy online instead. They decide to go buy online, whether it's on Amazon or maybe even buying from that retailer online, which then hurts the workers in these retail stores. You go into whole stores and there's just, aisle after aisle that's now locked up. And you got to wait for someone to buy one item. And some of these items are not high ticket items. They're not expensive. They're just some of the most targeted, most stolen items. And so it's a $5 or it's an $8 item. And I watch consumers in the store just get completely frustrated. We can solve this, right? We can work with retailers to get this stuff out from behind, these, containment systems, if we help them with large-scale theft. And I think that's what this bill will do, Mr. Chairman. It is a good piece of bipartisan legislation. So let's do that. Let's help out Americans so that, they're able to buy simple items without an attendant having to get a key to sell them deodorant. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I truly urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2835, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, bipartisan legislation that I am so proud to be a co-sponsor of. For years, the shadow economy has been growing in our cities and online, one that places consumers and our employers in danger. Finances criminal networks and also costs billions of dollars in losses. This is not a shoplifting by a person in need. This is a highly sophisticated criminal enterprise. This is not just a problem for retailers or for shipping companies. This is a threat to our public safety, our economy, and it's a threat to the rule of law. To understand the importance of this legislation, we must first understand what we're facing. Organized retail crime involves professional crews who systematically steal massive quantities of merchandise, everything from everyday essentials to luxury goods, not for personal use, but for resale. They exploit the anonymity of online marketplaces and the lack of coordinated law enforcement tools to operate with near impunity. This isn't petty theft, and you've heard that just said by my colleagues beforehand. It's a brazen, large-scale business model run by criminals who often have ties to transnational organizations involved in far worse crimes. The impact is staggering and flows far beyond a retailer's bottom line. Losses by retailers and shipping companies and increased costs from added security are felt at each and every cash register. Consumers end up paying higher prices, businesses lose sales, and less tax revenues flow to our communities. Walk into any store in any city, and you'll probably see, as we've mentioned before, locked cabinets and empty shelves. That's just some of the obvious effects of organized retail crime. Retailers are reporting that their employees are being threatened, assaulted, and traumatized while shoppers witness acts of apparent lawlessness as they shop for everyday household items or pop into their neighborhood pharmacy just to pick up their needed prescriptions. I often hear, why hasn't this been stopped? What can we do to stop this? And as we've tried to respond to this problem, we have learned there's a critical gap that these criminal networks slip right through every single time. This legislation would fill this gap in several ways. First, the bill would create a dedicated organized retail and supply chain crime coordination center, ensuring federal, state, and local law enforcement are working together from the same playbook, sharing their intelligence and targeting these networks all the way up to the top, from the boosters to the fences to the organizers. Second, it would strengthen the tools prosecutors need to go after those individuals who routinely are stealing these goods and merchandise, those who knowingly are trafficked in stolen goods, and those at the top of these criminal organizations plan, direct, and profit the most from these crimes. Third, it would give courts the power to order convicted perpetrators to hand over all of the money that they've earned from their crimes, as they should. We have a clear bipartisan solution before us. Thank God. This bill is necessary to protect our communities, to protect hardworking employees, to provide support to legitimate businesses, and to send a clear message that these criminals will no longer be allowed to slip through the cracks. I truly urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2853, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. This will be followed. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this legislation, but I tell you, I share the concerns of some who don't want to see a new agency set up to address this issue within the confines of the Department of Homeland Security. I share those concerns because DHS is over ICE, and ICE is out violating wholesale the rights of the people of this country. But nonetheless, I think Homeland Security is the agency which, under proper leadership, has the greatest opportunity to address this issue, which does affect our Homeland Security because it's international in scope. And what comforts me about the legislation, it has a 7-year sunset to it, so we'll have to reauthorize. We'll have to reauthorize it at that time. And every year, the Department of Homeland Security has to issue a report to Congress on its activities within this legislation, as authorized by this legislation. So I think the safeguards are in place. I'm sorry that the leadership is not in place, but the safeguards are in place, and that's why I am supporting this legislation, which addresses a harm that gets to the consumer in terms of causing prices to be increased with all of the theft that is going on and the use of the internet to facilitate the sale of these illicit goods or these ill-gotten goods, and the profits then going into organizations that are polycriminal. They're not just theft organizations or criminal organizations that deal in theft, but they deal in other areas of crime. And so I'm happy to support the legislation, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. This will be followed immediately by a vote on favorably reporting the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The questions on favorably reporting the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. Without objection, the bill will be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute, incorporating all adopted amendments, and staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Pursuant to notice, I call... Which one are we calling up? Laurel and then Darrell. Okay. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 6998, the Renewed Hope Act, for purpose of markup, and move that the committee report it favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 69.
Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill we are here today to discuss is the Renewed Hope Act. I am very pleased this legislation is being considered in today's committee markup. Mr. Chairman, the exploitation of children through child sex abuse material, or CSAM, unfortunately remains a serious issue both within the United States and abroad. Law enforcement agencies currently have nearly 50,000 images and videos connected to child sex abuse cases in which the victims have not yet been identified. Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, the leading agency combating child exploitation, are on the front lines of stopping this evil. Identifying children depicted in CSAM is a crucial step to stop their ongoing victimization and to bring justice to the offenders who are producing it. Thankfully, through joint efforts between federal, state, international, and non-governmental partners, the effort to identify and rescue children has begun. In 2023, HSI Cybercrime Center executed Operation Renewed Hope. Operation Renewed Hope ran from July 17, 2023 through August 4, 2023, and was a concerted effort by HSI and other law enforcement agencies to investigate online child exploitation and abuse. The operation led to the identification of 316 victims and the rescue of 14 victims, with new victims continuing to be identified well after conclusion of the operation. In 2025, HSI completed Operation Renewed Hope 3, which ran from February 24th to March 7th. Renewed Hope 3 led to the identification of 36 victims and created over 380 investigative leads related to additional victims. We appreciate the work being done to identify victims from government entities such as HSI and nonprofits such as NCMEC and the Tim Tebow Foundation. These groups are leading the charge to identify and rescue children, and we thank you. This is a huge step forward, but Congress has an opportunity to ensure that this important work continues to get done and that we continue to identify and rescue victims of child abuse. The Renewed Hope Act will result in more perpetrators being brought to justice by allowing HSI to hire, train, and assign additional computer forensics and criminal analysts to the Child Exploitation Investigations Unit and field offices to support victim identification and rescue efforts. This experience, focus, and expertise dramatically increases our ability to successfully investigate these cases and to rescue victims. I'd like to thank my friend and co-lead from the great state of Florida, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, for her continued commitment to this legislation. I'd also like to thank Chairman Biggs for prioritizing this issue in the Crime Subcommittee through multiple hearings, as well as robust support for the Renewed Hope Act. Let us work together to unite against this evil and make the world a safer place for children everywhere. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Raskin, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted to support this bipartisan legislation. America is seeing an explosion of child sex abuse material available and distributed online. Gruesome photos and videos depicting depraved acts against children are now increasingly available through virtually every internet-based technology there is, including social networking platforms, peer-to-peer file sharing sites, gaming sites, and mobile apps. The sickening demand for new, more egregious images and videos drives the market, resulting in the continued abuse and exploitation of children. Since the sexual violence depicted in these images and videos is most often a record of the victimization and suffering of an actual child, it's imperative that law enforcement make the identification of victims of child sex abuse material a priority. To that end, Congress must provide the resources and funding necessary to those agencies and groups charged with identifying, locating, and rescuing children at risk. The bill before us today, the Renewed Hope Act, would do just that. The bipartisan Renewed Hope Act would act as a force multiplier in the fight to identify and locate victims depicted in child sex abuse material. It would require the hiring and training of much-needed specialized victim identification personnel at the Department of Homeland Security, expanding the department's ability to identify and rescue victims of child sex exploitation and abuse. It's crucial that these new personnel perform the duties that are clearly articulated in the bill, so I thank Congresswoman Lee and her co-lead, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, for working to strengthen the bill by ensuring that these personnel remain dedicated to the specific purpose outlined in the legislation and are not reassigned to another mission such as immigration. Further, I understand that the Congresswoman will introduce an additional amendment to further protect these critical positions. With these necessary changes, I'm pleased to support the bill. We owe it to the victims of these atrocious crimes to ensure law enforcement is well-resourced to investigate, identify and locate victims, and hold perpetrators accountable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature
Without
of...
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text for the purposes of amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment simply makes a small change to the short title that does nothing to alter the substance of the bill. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, and thank you to the co-sponsors of this important bipartisan legislation, Congresswoman Lee and also Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. Images and videos of children being subjected to sexual abuse continue to spread at an alarming rate. We hear about the problem of child pornography, but often in ways that are focused on the perpetrator rather than being focused on the victim. Behind every image or video of a child engaged in explicit activity, there is a child and a story about how the child came to be subjected to such abuse. And there are many questions that must be answered. Who is the child? Where are they now? Are they still being abused? And most importantly, how do we end the abuse, bring this child to safety, and hold their abuser accountable? These challenging questions are often answered by investigators, computer forensic analysts, and law enforcement officers across state, local, and federal agencies. And there has been an increasing recognition that we can solve more of these mysteries, identify and locate more victims, and end more abuse if these agencies and experts do more of this work together. In 2023, Department of Homeland Security's Child Exploitation Unit brought together dozens of analysts and officers to launch Operation Renewed Hope. This operation combined experts from Homeland Security Investigations, the Cybercrime Center, FBI, DOJ, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Virginia State Police, and 14 foreign law enforcement agencies, all to work together to identify the victims and images of child sex abuse so that they could be brought to safety. Operation Renewed Hope was repeated and expanded in 2024 and in 2025. Across these 3 years, Operation Renewed Hope led to the identification of over 450 victims, many of whom were then able to be found or confirmed safe by law enforcement. The Renewed Hope Act builds on this work by requiring the Secretary of Homeland Security to hire and train 200 investigators, computer forensics, and criminal analysts to the Child Exploitation Investigations Unit and HSI field offices dedicated to child exploitation and victim identification. It would also require the Secretary to establish procedures to allow for better coordination of child sexual exploitation investigations. It would improve the skills of investigators and analysts by authorizing a victim identification training program that will help federal, state, local, military, and foreign law enforcement, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and civil service organizations that work to prevent child sexual exploitation, making sure that all of these partners can use new technologies to break open cases. And the bill would also establish privacy protections for victims to make sure their personal information is only shared for the limited purposes of investigating child exploitation or providing services and trauma-informed care to victims. Importantly, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz and Congresswoman Lee have worked together to ensure that the positions created by this bill cannot be redirected away from this important work, and I understand that there will be a further amendment to ensure that is the case. An unknowable number of victims are still being abused and exploited. With this bill, we can enhance the expertise and manpower to uncover the children behind these images. We can hold the perpetrators of this abuse accountable. And most importantly, we can end the abuse and make sure these victims are safe, healthy, and whole again. Together, we can help victims escape, rebuild, and heal. I want to thank my colleagues, Congresswoman Lee and Congresswoman Wasserman